All right, everyone. Welcome back to our Wuthering Heights read-through. We're going to be starting on Volume 2. Volume 2, Chapter 1. Another week over, and I am so many days nearer health and spring. I have now heard all my neighbors' history at different sittings, as the housekeeper could spare time from more important occupations. I'll continue it in her own words, only a little condensed. She is, on the whole, a very fair narrator, and I don't think I could improve her style. In the evening, she said, the evening of my visit to the Heights, I knew as well as if I saw him that Mr. Heathcliff was about the place, and I shunned going out, because I still carried his letter in my pocket, and didn't want to be threatened or teased any more. I had made up my mind not to give it till my master went somewhere, as I could not guess how its receipt would affect Catherine. The consequence was that it did not reach her before the lapse of 3 days. The 4th was Sunday, and I brought it into her room after the family were gone to church. There was a manservant left to keep the house with me, and we generally made a practice of locking the doors during the hours of service. But on that occasion the weather was so warm and pleasant that I set them wide open, and to fulfill my engagement, as I knew who would be coming, I told my companion that the mistress wished very much for some oranges, and he must run over to the village and get a few to be paid for on the morrow. He departed, and I went upstairs. Mrs. Linton sat in a loose white dress, with a light shawl over her shoulders, in the recess of the open window, as usual. Her thick, long hair had been partly removed at the beginning of her illness, and now she wore it simply combed in its natural tresses over her temples and neck. Her appearance was altered, as I had told Heathcliff, but when she was calm there seemed unearthly beauty in the change. The flash of her eyes had been succeeded by a dreamy and melancholy softness. They no longer gave the impression of looking at the objects around her. They appeared always to gaze beyond, and far beyond, you would have said, out of this world. Then the paleness of her face, its haggard aspect having vanished as she recovered flesh, and the peculiar expression arising from her mental state, though painfully suggestive of their causes, added to the touching interest which she wakened, and invariably to me, I know, and to any person who saw her, I should think, refuted more tangible proofs of convalescence, and stamped her as one doomed to decay. A book lay spread on the sill before her, and the scarcely perceptible wind fluttered its leaves at intervals. I believe Linton had laid it there, for she never endeavored to divert herself with reading, or occupation of any kind, and he would spend many an hour in trying to entice her attention to some subject which had formerly been her amusement. She was conscious of his aim, and in her better moods endured his efforts placidly, only showing their uselessness by now and then suppressing a wearied sigh, and checking him at last with the saddest of smiles and kisses. At other times she would turn petulantly away, and hide her face in her hands, or even push him off angrily. And then he took care to let her alone, for he was certain of doing no good. Gimmerton Chapel bells were still ringing, and the full, mellow flow of the beck in the valley came soothingly on the ear. It was a sweet substitute for the yet absent murmur of the summer foliage, which drowned that music about the Grange when the trees were in leaf. At Wuthering Heights it always sounded on quiet days, following a great thaw, or a season of steady rain. And of Wuthering Heights Catherine was thinking as she listened, that is, if she thought, or listened at all. But she had the vague, distant look mentioned before, which expressed no recognition of material things, either by ear or eye. "There's a letter for you, Mrs. Linton," I said, gently inserting it in one hand that rested on her knee. "You must read it immediately, because it wants an answer. Shall I break the seal?" Yes, she answered, without altering the direction of her eyes. I opened it. It was very short. Now, I continued, read it. She drew away her hand and let it fall. I replaced it in her lap and stood waiting till it should please her to glance down, but that movement was so long delayed that at last I resumed. Must I read it, ma'am? It is from Mr. Heathcliff. There was a start, and a troubled gleam of recollection, and a struggle to arrange her ideas. She lifted the letter and seemed to peruse it, and when she came to the signature she sighed. Yet still I found she had not gathered its import, for upon my desiring to hear her reply, she merely pointed to the name, and gazed at me with mournful and questioning eagerness. "Well, he wishes to see you," said I, guessing her need of an interpreter. "He's in the garden by this time, and impatient to know what answer I shall bring." As I spoke, I observed a large dog lying on the sunny grass beneath, raise its ears as if about to bark, and then smoothing them back, announce by a wag of the tail that someone approached whom it did not consider a stranger. Mrs. Linton bent forward and listened breathlessly. The minute after a step traversed the hall, the open house was too tempting for Heathcliff to resist walking in. Most likely he supposed that I was inclined to shirk my promise, and so resolved to trust his own audacity. With straining eagerness, Catherine gazed towards the entrance of her chamber. He did not hit the right room directly. She motioned me to admit him, but he found it out ere I could reach the door, and in a stride or two was at her side and had her grasped in his arms. He neither spoke nor loosed his hold for some 5 minutes, during which period he bestowed more kisses than ever he gave in his life before, I dare say. But then my mistress had kissed him first, and I plainly saw that he could hardly bear, for downright agony, to look into her face. The same conviction had stricken him as me, from the instant he beheld her, that there was no prospect of ultimate recovery there. She was fated, sure to die. "Oh, Cathy! Oh, my life! How can I bear it?" was the first sentence he uttered, in a tone that did not seek to disguise his despair. And now he stared at her so earnestly that I thought the very intensity of his gaze would bring tears into his eyes, but they burned with anguish. They did not melt. "What now?" said Catherine, leaning back and returning his look with a suddenly clouded brow. Her humour was a mere vein for constantly varying caprices. "You and Edgar have broken my heart, Heathcliff, and you both come to bewail the deed to me, as if you were the people to be pitied. I shall not pity you, not I. You have killed me and thriven on it, I think. How strong you are! How many years do you mean to live after I am gone?" Heathcliff had knelt on one knee to embrace her. He attempted to rise, but she seized his hair and kept him down. "I wish I could hold you," she continued, bitterly, "till we were both dead. I shouldn't care what you suffered. I care nothing for your sufferings. Why shouldn't you suffer? I do. Will you forget me? Will you be happy when I am in the earth? Will you say 20 years hence, 'That's the grave of Catherine Earnshaw. I loved her long ago, and was wretched to lose her, but it is past. I've loved many others since. My children are dearer to me than she was. And at death I shall not rejoice that I am going to her. I shall be sorry that I must leave them. Will you say so, Heathcliff?" "Don't torture me till I'm as mad as yourself," cried he, wrenching his head free and grinding his teeth. The two, to a cool spectator, made a strange and fearful picture. Well might Catherine deem that heaven would be a land of exile to her, unless with her mortal body she cast away her mortal character also. Her present countenance had a wild vindictiveness in its white cheek, and a bloodless lip, and scintillating eye, and she retained in her closed fingers a portion of the locks she had been grasping. As to her companion, while raising himself with one hand, he had taken her arm with the other, and so inadequate was the stock of his gentleness to the requirements of her condition, that on his letting go I saw 4 distinct impressions left blue in the colourless skin. "Are you possessed with a devil?" he pursued, savagely, "to talk in that manner to me when you are dying? Do you reflect that all those words will be branded in my memory, and eating deeper eternally after you have left me? You know you lie to say I have killed you, and Catherine, you know that I could as soon forget you as my existence. Is it not sufficient for your infernal selfishness that while you are at peace I shall writhe in the torments of hell?" "I shall not be at peace," moaned Catherine, recalled to a sense of physical weakness by the violent, unequal throbbing of her heart, which beat visibly and audibly under this excess of agitation. She said nothing further till the paroxysm was over, then she continued more kindly. "I'm not wishing you greater torment than I have, Heathcliff. I only wish us never to be parted, and should a word of mine distress you hereafter, think I feel the same distress underground, and for my own sake forgive me. Come here, and kneel down again. You never harmed me in your life. Nay, if you nurse anger, that will be worse to remember than my harsh words. Won't you come here again? Do." Heathcliff went to the back of her chair, and leant over, but not so far as to let her see his face, which was livid with emotion. She bent round to look at him. He would not permit it. Turning abruptly, he walked to the fireplace, where he stood, silent, with his back towards us. Mrs. Linton's glance followed him suspiciously. Every movement woke a new sentiment in her. After a pause, and a prolonged gaze, she resumed, addressing me in accents of indignant disappointment. "Oh, you see, Nelly, he would not relent a moment to keep me out of the grave. That is how I'm loved. Well, never mind. That is not my Heathcliff. I shall love mine yet, and take him with me. He's in my soul. And," added she musingly, "the thing that irks me most is this shattered prison after all. I'm tired of being enclosed here. I'm wearying to escape into that glorious world, and to be always there, not seeing it dimly through tears, and yearning for it through the walls of an aching heart, but really with it and in it. Nelly, you think you are better and more fortunate than I, in full health and strength. You are sorry for me. Very soon that will be altered. I shall be sorry for you. I shall be incomparably beyond and above you all. I wonder he won't be near me." She went on to herself. "I thought he wished it. Heathcliff, dear, you should not be sullen now. Do come to me, Heathcliff." In her eagerness she rose, and supported herself on the arm of the chair. At that earnest appeal he turned to her, looking absolutely desperate. His eyes, wide and wet, at last flashed fiercely on her. His breast heaved convulsively. An instant they held asunder, and then how they met I hardly saw, but Catherine made a spring, and he caught her, and they were locked in an embrace from which I thought my mistress would never be released alive. In fact, to my eyes, she seemed directly insensible. He flung himself into the nearest seat, and on my approaching hurriedly to ascertain if she had fainted, he gnashed at me and foamed like a mad dog, and gathered her to him with greedy jealousy. I did not feel as if I were in the company of a creature of my own species. It appeared that he would not understand, though I spoke to him, so I stood off and held my tongue in great perplexity. A movement of Catherine's relieved me a little presently. She put up her hand to clasp his neck, and bring her cheek to his as he held her, while he in return, covering her with frantic caresses, said wildly, "You teach me now how cruel you've been, cruel and false. Why did you despise me? Why did you betray your own heart, Cathy? I have not one word of comfort. You deserve this. You have killed yourself. Yes, you may kiss me, and cry, and wring out my kisses and tears. They'll blight you, they'll damn you. You loved me, then what right had you to leave me? What right? Answer me, for the poor fancy you felt for Linton? Because misery, and degradation, and death, and nothing that God or Satan could inflict would have parted us. You, of your own will, did it. I have not broken your heart. You have broken it, and in breaking it you have broken mine. So much the worse for me that I am strong. Do I want to live? What kind of living will it be when you... Oh God, would you like to live with your soul in the grave? Let me alone, let me alone, sobbed Catherine. If I've done wrong, I'm dying for it. It is enough. You left me too, but I won't upbraid you. I forgive you. Forgive me. It is hard to forgive and to look at those eyes and feel those wasted hands, he answered. Kiss me again, and don't let me see your eyes. I forgive what you have done to me. I love my murderer, but yours? How can I? They were silent, their faces hid against each other, and washed by each other's tears. At least I could suppose the weeping was on both sides, as it seemed Heathcliff could weep on a great occasion like this. I grew very uncomfortable, meanwhile, for the afternoon wore fast away. The man whom I had sent off returned from his errand, and I could distinguish by the shine of the westering sun up the valley a concourse thickening outside Gimmerton Chapel porch. "Service is over," I announced. "My master will be here in half an hour." Heathcliff groaned a curse, and strained Catherine closer. She never moved. Ere long I perceived a group of servants passing up the road toward the kitchen wing. Mr. Linton was not far behind. He opened the gate himself, and sauntered slowly up, probably enjoying the lovely afternoon that breathed as soft as summer. "Now he is here!" I exclaimed. "For heaven's sake, hurry down! You'll not meet anyone on the front stairs. Do be quick, and stay among the trees till he is fairly in." "I must go, Cathy," said Heathcliff, sinking to extricate himself from his companion's arms. "But if I live, I'll see you again before you are asleep. I won't stray 5 yards from your window." "You must not go," she answered, holding him as firmly as her strength allowed. "You shall not, I tell you." "For 1 hour," he pleaded, earnestly. "Not for 1 minute," she replied. "I must. Linton will be up immediately," persisted the alarmed intruder. He would have risen and unfixed her fingers by the act. She clung fast, gasping. There was mad resolution in her face. "No!" she shrieked. "Oh, don't go! It is the last time. Edgar will not hurt us. Heathcliff, I shall die! I shall die!" "Damn the fool! There he is!" cried Heathcliff, sinking back into his seat. "Hush, my darling! Hush, hush, Catherine! I'll stay. If he shot me so, I'd expire with a blessing on my lips." And there they were fast again. I heard my master mounting the stairs. The cold sweat ran from my forehead. I was horrified. "Are you going to listen to her ravings?" I said passionately. "She does not know what she says. Will you ruin her because she has not wit to help herself? Get up! You could be free instantly. That is the most diabolical deed that ever you did. We are all done for, master, mistress, and servant." I wrung my hands and cried out, and Mr. Linton hastened his step at the noise. In the midst of my agitation, I was sincerely glad to observe that Catherine's arms had fallen relaxed, and her head hung down. "She's fainted or dead," I thought, "so much the better. Far better that she should be dead than lingering a burden and a misery maker to all about her." Edgar sprang to his unbidden guest, blanched with astonishment and rage. What he meant to do, I cannot tell. However, the other stopped all demonstrations at once by placing the lifeless-looking form in his arms. Look there. Unless you be a fiend, help her first. Then you shall speak to me." He walked into the parlor and sat down. Mr. Linton summoned me, and with great difficulty, and after resorting to many means, we managed to restore her to sensation. But she was all bewildered. She sighed and moaned and knew nobody. Edgar, in his anxiety for her, forgot his hated friend. I did not. I went at the earliest opportunity and besought him to depart, affirming that Catherine was better, and he should hear from me in the morning how she passed the night. "I shall not refuse to go out of doors," he answered, "but I shall stay in the garden. And Nelly, mind you keep your word to-morrow. I shall be under those larch trees, mind, or I pay another visit whether Linton be in or not." He sent a rapid glance through the half-open door of the chamber, and ascertaining that what I stated was apparently true, delivered the house of his luckless presence. Chapter 2. About 12 o'clock that night was born the Catherine you saw at Wuthering Heights, a puny 7 months child, and 2 hours after the mother died, having never recovered sufficient consciousness to miss Heathcliff or know Edgar. The latter's distraction at his bereavement is a subject too painful to be dwelt on. Its after effects showed how deep the sorrow sunk. A great addition in my eyes was his being left without an heir. I bemoaned that as I gazed on the feeble orphan, and I mentally abused old Linton for what was only natural partiality, the securing his estate to his own daughter instead of his son's. An unwelcomed infant it was, poor thing. It might have wailed out of life, and nobody cared a morsel during those first hours of existence. We redeemed the neglect afterwards, but its beginning was as friendless as its end is likely to be. Next morning, bright and cheerful out of doors, stole softened in through the blinds of the silent room, and suffused the couch and its occupant with a mellow, tender glow. Edgar Linton had his head laid on the pillow, and his eyes shut. His young and fair features were almost as death-like as those of the form beside him, and almost as fixed. But his was the hush of exhausted anguish, and hers of perfect peace. Her brow smooth, her lids closed, her lips wearing the expression of a smile. No angel in heaven could be more beautiful than she appeared, and I partook of the infinite calm in which she lay. My mind was never in a holier frame than while I gazed on that untroubled image of divine rest. I instinctively echoed the words she had uttered a few hours before. Incomparably beyond and above us all, whether still on earth or now in heaven, her spirit is at home with God. I don't know if it be a peculiarity in me, but I am seldom otherwise than happy while watching in the chamber of death, should no frenzied or despairing mourner share the duty with me. I see a repose that neither earth nor hell can break, and I feel an assurance of the endless and shadowless hereafter, the eternity they have entered, where life is boundless in its duration, and love in its sympathy, and joy in its fullness. I noticed on that occasion how much selfishness there is even in a love like Mr. Linton's, when he so regretted Catherine's blessed release. To be sure, one might have doubted, after the wayward and impatient existence she had led, whether she merited a haven of peace at last. One might doubt in seasons of cold reflection, but not then in the presence of her corpse. It asserted its own tranquillity, which seemed a pledge of equal quiet to its former inhabitants. Do you believe such people are happy in the other world, sir? I'd give a great deal to know. I declined answering Mrs. Dean's question, which struck me as something heterodox. She proceeded. Retracing the course of Catherine Linton, I fear we have no right to think she is, but will leave her with her Maker. The master looked asleep, and I ventured soon after sunrise to quit the room, and steal out to the pure, refreshing air. The servants thought me gone to shake off the drowsiness of my protracted watch. In reality, my chief motive was seeing Mr. Heathcliff. If he had remained among the larches all night, he would have heard nothing of the stir at the Grange, unless, perhaps, he might catch the gallop of the messenger going to Gimmerton. If he had come nearer, he would probably be aware, from the lights flitting to and fro, and the opening and shutting of the outer doors, that all was not right within. I wished, yet feared, to find him. I felt the terrible news must be told, and I longed to get it over. But how to do it, I did not know. He was there, at least a few yards further in the park, leant against an old ash tree, his hat off, and his hair soaked with the dew that had gathered on the budded branches, and fell, pattering round him. He had been standing a long time in that position, for I saw a pair of osels passing and repassing, scarcely 3 feet from him, busy in building their nest, and regarding his proximity no more than that of a piece of timber. They flew off at my approach, and he raised his eyes and spoke. "She's dead," he said. "I've not waited for you to learn that. Put your handkerchief away. Don't snivel before me. Damn you all, she wants none of your tears." I was weeping as much for him as her. We do sometimes pity creatures that have none of the feeling either for themselves or others. And when I first looked into his face, I perceived that he had got intelligence of the catastrophe, and a foolish notion struck me that his heart was quelled, and he prayed, because his lips moved, and his gaze was bent on the ground. "Yes, she's dead," I answered, checking my sobs and drying my cheeks. "Gone to heaven, I hope, where we may, everyone, join her, if we take due warning, and leave our evil ways to follow good." "Did she take due warning, then?" asked Heathcliff, attempting a sneer. "Did she die like a saint? Come, give me a true history of the event. How did—" He endeavored to pronounce the name, but could not manage it, and compressing his mouth, he held a silent combat with his inward agony, defying, meanwhile, my sympathy with an unflinching, ferocious stare. "How did she die?" he resumed, at last, fain, notwithstanding his hardihood, to have a support behind him, for after the struggle he trembled in spite of himself to his very finger ends. "Poor wretch," I thought, "you have a heart and nerves the same as your brother men. Why should you be so anxious to conceal them? Your pride cannot blind God. You tempt him to wring them till he forces a cry of humiliation." "Quietly as a lamb," I answered aloud, "she drew a sigh, and stretched herself like a child reviving and sinking again to sleep, and 5 minutes after I felt one little pulse at her heart, and nothing more." "And did she ever mention me?" he asked, hesitating, as if he dreaded the answer to his question would introduce details that he could not bear to hear. "Her senses never returned. She recognized nobody from the time you left her," I said. "She lies with a sweet smile on her face, and her latest ideas wandered back to pleasant early days. Her life closed in a gentle dream. May she wake as kindly in the other world." "May she wake in torment!" he cried, with a frightful vehemence, stamping his foot, and groaning in a sudden paroxysm of ungovernable passion. "Why, she's a liar to the end! Where is she? Not there, not in heaven, not perished. Where? Oh, you said you cared nothing for my sufferings, and I pray one answer. I repeat it till my tongue stiffens. Catherine Earnshaw, may you not rest as long as I am living. You said I killed you? Haunt me then. The murdered do haunt their murderers. I believe I know that ghosts have wandered on earth. Be with me always. Take any form. Drive me mad. Only do not leave me in this abyss where I cannot find you. O God, it is unutterable. I cannot live without my life. I cannot live without my soul. He dashed his head against the knotted trunk, and lifting up his eyes, howled, not like a man, but like a savage beast getting goaded to death with knives and spears. I observed several splashes of blood about the bark of the tree, and his hand and forehead were both stained. Probably the scene I witnessed was a repetition of others acted during the night. It hardly moved my compassion. It appalled me. Still, I felt reluctant to quit him so. But the moment he recollected himself enough to notice me watching, he thundered a command for me to go, and I obeyed. He was beyond my skill to quiet or console. Mrs. Linton's funeral was appointed to take place on the Friday following her decease. Until then her coffin remained uncovered and strewn with flowers and scented leaves in the great drawing-room. Linton spent his days and nights there, a sleepless guardian, and, a circumstance concealed from all but me, Heathcliff spent his nights, at least outside, equal a stranger to repose. I held no communication with him. Still, I was conscious of his design to enter if he could, and on the Tuesday, a little after dark, when my master, from sheer fatigue, had been compelled to retire a couple of hours, I went and opened one of the windows, moved by his perseverance to give him a chance of bestowing on the faded image of his idol one final adieu. He did not omit to avail himself of the opportunity, cautiously and briefly, too cautiously to betray his presence by the slightest noise. Indeed, I shouldn't have discovered that he had been there, except for the disarrangement of the drapery about the corpse's face, and for observing on the floor a curl of light hair, fastened with a silver thread, which on examination I ascertained to have been taken from a locket hung round Catherine's neck. Heathcliff had opened the trinket and cast out its contents, replacing them by a black lock of his own. I twisted the two and enclosed them together. Mr. Earnshaw was, of course, invited to attend the remains of his sister to the grave, and he sent no excuse, but he never came, so that besides her husband, the mourners were wholly composed of tenants and servants. Isabella was not asked. The place of Catherine's interment, to the surprise of the villagers, was neither in the chapel, under the carved monument of the Linton, nor yet by the tombs of her own relations outside. It was dug on a green slope in a corner of the kirkyard, where the wall is so low that heath and bilberry plants have climbed over it from the moor, and peat mould almost buries it. Her husband lies in the same spot now, and they have each a simple headstone above, and a plain grey block at their feet to mark the graves. Chapter 3. That Friday made the last of our fine days for a month. In the evening the weather broke. The wind shifted from south to northeast, and brought rain first, and then sleet and snow. On the morrow one could hardly imagine that there had been 3 weeks of summer. The primroses and crocuses were hidden under wintry drifts. The larks were silent, the young leaves of the early trees smitten and blackened, and dreary and chill and dismal that morrow did creep over. My master kept his room. I took possession of the lonely parlor, converting it into a nursery, and there I was sitting, with the moaning doll of a child laid on my knee, rocking it to and fro, and watching meanwhile the still driving flakes build up the uncurtained window, when the door opened and some person entered, out of breath and laughing. My anger was greater than my astonishment for a minute. I supposed it one of the maids, and I cried, "Have done! How dare you show your giddiness here? What would Mr. Linton say if he heard you?" "Excuse me," answered a familiar voice, "but I know Edgar is in bed, and I cannot stop myself." With that the speaker came forward to the fire, panting and holding her hand to her side. "I have run the whole way from Wuthering Heights," she continued, after a pause. "Except where I've flown, I couldn't count the number of falls I've had. Oh, I'm aching all over. Don't be alarmed. There shall be an explanation as soon as I can give it. Only just have the goodness to step out, and order the carriage to take me on to Gimmerton, and tell a servant to seek up a few clothes in my wardrobe." The intruder was Mrs. Heathcliff. She certainly seemed in no laughing predicament. Her hair streamed on her shoulders, dripping with snow and water. She was dressed in the girlish dress she commonly wore, befitting her age more than her position. A low frock with short sleeves, and nothing on either head or neck. The frock was of light silk, and clung to her with wet, and her feet were protected merely by thin slippers. Add to this a deep cut under one ear, which only the cold prevented from bleeding profusely. A white face scratched and bruised, and a frame hardly able to support itself through fatigue, and you may fancy my first fright was not much allayed when I had leisure to examine her. "My dear young lady," I exclaimed, "I'll stir nowhere and hear nothing till you have removed every article of your clothes and put on dry things. And certainly you shall not go to Gimmerton to-night, so it is needless to order the carriage." "Certainly I shall," she said, "walking or riding. Yet I've no objection to dress myself decently. And, see how it flows down my neck now? The fire does make it smart." She insisted on my fulfilling her directions before she would let me touch her, and not till after the coachman had been instructed to get ready, and a maid sat to pack up some necessary attire, did I obtain her consent for binding the wound, and helping to change her garments. "Now, Ellen," she said, when my task was finished, and she was seated in an easy chair on the hearth, with a cup of tea before her, "you sit down opposite me, and put poor Catherine's baby away. I don't like to see it. You mustn't think I care little for Catherine, because I behaved so foolishly on entering. I've cried, too, bitterly. Yes, more than anyone else has reason to cry. We parted unreconciled, you remember, and I shan't forgive myself. But for all that, I was not going to sympathize with him, the brute beast. Oh, give me the poker. This is the last thing of his I have about me." She slipped the gold ring from her third finger and threw it on the floor. "I'll smash it," she continued, striking with childish spite, "and then I'll burn it." And she took and dropped the misused article among the coals. "There! He shall buy another, if he gets me back again. He'd be capable of coming to seek me, to tease Edgar. I dare not stay, lest that notion should possess his wicked head. And besides, Edgar has not been kind, has he? And I won't come suing for his assistance, nor will I bring him into more trouble. Necessity compelled me to seek shelter here. Though, if I had not learnt he was out of the way, I'd have halted at the kitchen, washed my face, warmed myself, got you to bring what I wanted, and departed again to anywhere out of the reach of my accursed, of that incarnate goblin. Ah, he was in such a fury if he had caught me. It's a pity. Earnshaw is not his match in strength. I wouldn't have run till I'd seen him all but demolished, had Hindley been able to do it." "Well, don't talk so fast, miss," I interrupted. "You'll disorder the handkerchief I have tied round your face, and make the cut bleed again. Drink your tea, and take breath, and give over laughing. Laughter is sadly out of place under this roof, and in your condition." "An undeniable truth," she replied. "Listen to that child. It maintains a constant wail. Send it out of my hearing for an hour. I shan't stay any longer." I rang the bell and committed it to a servant's care, and then I inquired what had urged her to escape from Wuthering Heights in such an unlikely plight, and where she meant to go, as she refused remaining with us. "I ought and I wish to remain," answered she, "to cheer Edgar and take care of the baby, for two things, and because the Grange is my right home. But I tell you he wouldn't let me. Do you think he could bear to see me grow fat and merry, and could bear to think that we were tranquil, and not resolve on poisoning our comfort? Now, I have the satisfaction of being sure that he detests me to the point of its annoying him seriously to have me within earshot or eyesight. I notice when I enter his presence, the muscles of his countenance are involuntarily distorted into an expression of hatred, partly arising from his knowledge of the good causes I have to feel that sentiment for him, and partly from original aversion. It is strong enough to make me feel pretty certain that he would not chase me over England, supposing I contrived a clear escape, and therefore I must get quite away. I've recovered from my first desire to be killed by him. I'd rather he'd kill himself. He has extinguished my love effectually, and so I'm at my ease. I can recollect yet how I loved him, and can dimly imagine that I could still be loving him if— No, no, even if he had doted on me, the devilish nature would have revealed its existence somehow. Catherine had an awfully perverted taste to esteem him so dearly, knowing him so well. Monster! Would that he could be blotted out of creation and out of my memory. "Hush, hush! He's a human being," I said. "Be more charitable. There are worse men than he is yet." "He's not a human being," she retorted, "and he had no claim on my charity. I gave him my heart, and he took and pinched it to death and flung it back at me. People feel with their hearts, Ellen, and since he has destroyed mine, I have not power to feel for him. And I would not, though he groaned from this to his dying day, and wept tears of blood for Catherine. No, indeed, indeed I wouldn't." And here Isabella began to cry, but immediately dashing the water from her lashes, she recommenced. "You asked what has driven me to flight at last. I was compelled to attempt it because I had succeeded in rousing his rage a pitch above his malignity. Pulling out the nerves with red-hot pincers requires more coolness than knocking on the head. He was worked up to forget the fiendish prudence he boasted of, and proceeding to murderous violence. I experienced pleasure in being able to exasperate him. The sense of pleasure woke my instinct of self-preservation. So I fairly broke free, and if ever I come into his hands again, he is welcome to a signal revenge. Yesterday, you know, Mr. Earnshaw should have been at the funeral. He kept himself sober for the purpose. Tolerably sober. Not going to bed mad at 6 o'clock and getting up drunk at 12. Consequently he rose, in suicidal low spirits, as fit for the church as for a dance, and instead he sat down by the fire and swallowed gin or brandy by tumblerfuls. Heathcliff, I shudder to name him, has been a stranger in the house from last Sunday till to-day. Whether the angels have fed him, or his kin beneath, I cannot tell, but he has not eaten a meal with us for nearly a week. He has just come home at dawn, and gone upstairs to his chamber, locking himself in as if anybody dreamt of coveting his company. There he has continued, praying like a Methodist, only the deity he implored in senseless dust and ashes, and God, when addressed, was curiously confounded with his own black father. After concluding these precious orisons, and they lasted generally till he grew hoarse, and his voice was strangled in his throat, he would be off again, always straight down to the Grange. I wonder Edgar did not send for a constable and give him into custody. For me, grieved as I was about Catherine, it was impossible to avoid regarding this season of deliverance from degrading impression as a holiday. I recovered spirits sufficient to hear Joseph's eternal lectures without weeping, and to move up and down the house, less with the foot of a frightened thief than formerly. You wouldn't think that I should cry at anything Joseph could say, but he and Hareton are detestable companions. I'd rather sit with Henley and hear his awful talk than with the little master and his staunch supporter, that odious old man. When Heathcliff is in, I'm often obliged to seek the kitchen and their society, or starve among the damp, uninhabited chambers. When he is not, as was the case this week, I establish a table and chair at one corner of the house fire, and never mind how Mr. Earnshaw may occupy himself, and he does not interfere with my arrangements. He is quieter now than he used to be, if no one provokes him, more sullen and depressed and less furious. Joseph affirms he's sure he's an altered man, that the Lord has touched his heart, and he is saved so as by fire. I'm puzzled to detect signs of the favorable change, but it is not my business. Yesterday evening I sat in my nook reading some old books, till late on towards 12. It seemed so dismal to go upstairs with the wild snow blowing outside, and my thoughts continually reverting to the kirkyard and the new-made grave. I dared hardly lift my eyes from the page before me, that melancholy scene so instantly usurped its place. Henley sat opposite, his head leant on his hand, perhaps meditating on the same subject. He had ceased drinking at a point below irrationality, and had neither stirred nor spoken during 2 or 3 hours. There was no sound through the house but the moaning wind, which shook the windows every now and then, the faint crackling of the coals, and the click of my snuffers as I removed at intervals the long wick of the candle. Hareton and Joseph were probably fast asleep in bed. It was very, very sad, and while I read, I sighed, for it seemed as if all joy had vanished from the world, never to be restored. The doleful silence was broken, at length, by the sound of the kitchen latch. Heathcliff had returned from his watch earlier than usual, owing, I suppose, to the sudden storm. That entrance was fastened, and we heard him coming round to get in by the other. I rose with an irrepressible expression of what I felt on my lips, which induced my companion, who had been staring towards the door, to turn and look at me. "I'll keep him out for 5 minutes," he exclaimed. "You won't object?" "No, you may keep him out the whole night for me," I answered. "Do, put the key in the lock and draw the bolts." Earnshaw accomplished this ere his guest reached the front. He then came and brought his chair to the other side of my table, leaning over it and searching in my eyes a sympathy with the burning hate that gleamed from his, as he both looked and felt like an assassin. He couldn't exactly find that, but he discovered enough to encourage him to speak. "You and I," he said, "have each a great debt to settle with the man out yonder. If we were neither of us cowards, we might combine to discharge it. Are you as soft as your brother? Are you willing to endure to the last, and not once attempt a repayment?" "I'm weary of enduring now," I replied, "and I'd be glad of retaliation that wouldn't recoil on myself. But treachery and violence are spears pointed at both ends. They wound those who resort to them worse than their enemies." "Treachery and violence are a just return for treachery and violence," cried Hindley. "Mrs. Heathcliff, I'll ask you to do nothing but sit still and be dumb. Tell me now, can you? I'm sure you would have as much pleasure as I in witnessing the conclusion of the fiend's existence. He'll be your death unless you overreach him, and he'll be my ruin. Damn the hellish villain! He knocks at the door as if you were master here already. Promise to hold your tongue, and before that clock strikes, it wants 3 minutes of 1, you're a free woman." He took the implements which I described to you in my letter from his breast, and would have turned down the candle. I snatched it away, however, and seized his arm. "I'll not hold my tongue," I said. "You mustn't touch him. Let the door remain shut, and be quiet." "No. I've formed my resolution, and by God I'll execute it," cried the desperate being. "I'll do you a kindness in spite of yourself, inheriting justice. And you needn't trouble your head to screen me. Catherine is gone. Nobody alive would regret me, or be ashamed, though I cut my throat this minute. And it's time to make an end." I might as well have struggled with a bear, or reasoned with a lunatic. The only resource left to me was to run to a lattice, and warn his intended victim of the fate which awaited him. "You'd better seek shelter somewhere else tonight," I exclaimed in a rather triumphant tone. "Mr. Earnshaw has a mind to shoot you if you persist in endeavoring to enter." "You'd better open the door, you," he answered, addressing me by some elegant term that I don't care to repeat. "I shall not meddle in the matter," I retorted again. "Come in and get shot if you please. I've done my duty." With that, I shut the window and returned to my place by the fire, having too small a stock of hypocrisy at my command to pretend any anxiety for the danger that menaced him. Earnshaw swore passionately at me, affirming that I loved the villain yet, and calling me all sorts of names for the base spirit I evinced. And I, in my secret heart, and conscience never reproached me, thought what a blessing it would be for him should Heathcliff put him out of his misery, and what a blessing for me should he send Heathcliff to his right abode. As I sat nursing these reflections, the casement behind me was banged on to the floor by a blow from the latter individual, and his black countenance looked blightingly through. The stanchions stood too close to suffer his shoulders to follow, and I smiled, exulting in my fancied security. His hair and clothes were whitened with snow, and his sharp cannibal teeth, revealed by cold and wrath, gleamed through the dark. "Isabella, let me in, or I'll make you repent," he gurned, as Joseph calls it. "I cannot commit murder," I replied. "Mr. Hindley stands sentinel with a knife and loaded pistol." "Let me in by the kitchen door," he said. "Hindley will be there before me," I answered, "and that's a poor love of yours that cannot bear a shower of snow. We were left at peace in our beds as long as the summer moon shone, but the moment a blast of winter returns, you must run for shelter. Heathcliff, if I were you, I'd go stretch myself over her grave and die like a faithful dog. The world is surely not worth living in now, is it? You had distinctly impressed on me the idea that Catherine was the whole joy of your life. I can't imagine how you think of surviving her loss." "He's there, is he?" exclaimed my companion, rushing to the gap. "If I can get my arm out, I can hit him." "I'm afraid, Ellen, you'll set me down as really wicked, but you don't know all, so don't judge. I wouldn't have aided or abetted an attempt on even his life for anything. Wish that he were dead I must, and therefore I was fearfully disappointed and unnerved by terror for the consequences of my taunting speech when he flung himself on Earnshaw's weapon and wrenched it from his grasp. The charge exploded, and the knife, in springing back, closed into its owner's wrist. Heathcliff pulled it away by main force, slitting up the flesh as it passed on, and thrust it, dripping, into his pocket. He then took a stone, struck down the division between two windows, and sprung in. His adversary had fallen, senseless with excessive pain and the flow of blood that gushed from an artery or a large vein. The ruffian kicked and trampled on him and dashed his head repeatedly against the flags, holding me with one hand meantime to prevent me summoning Joseph. He exerted preterhuman self-denial and abstaining from finishing him completely, but getting out of breath, he finally desisted and dragged the apparently inanimate body onto the settee. There he tore off the sleeves of Earnshaw's coat and bound up the wound with brutal roughness, spitting and cursing during the operation as energetically as he had kicked before. Being at liberty, I lost no time in seeking the old servant, who, having gathered by degrees the purport of my hasty tale, hurried below, gasping as he descended the steps 2 at once. "What is there to do, Na? What is there to do, Na?" "There's this to do," thundered Heathcliff, "that your master's mad, and should he last another month, I'll have him to an asylum. And how the devil did you come to fasten me out, you toothless hound? Don't stand muttering and mumbling there. Come, I'm not going to nurse him. Wash that stuff away, and mind the sparks of your candle. It is more than half brandy." "And so you've been murdering on him?" exclaimed Joseph, lifting his hands and eyes in horror. "If ever I saw a seed like this, may the Lord—" Heathcliff gave him a push onto his knees in the middle of the blood, and flung a towel to him. But instead of proceeding to dry it up, he joined his hands and began a prayer which excited my laughter from its odd phraseology. I was in the condition of mind to be shocked at nothing. In fact, I was as reckless as some malefactors show themselves at the foot of the gallows. "Oh, I forgot you," said the tyrant. "You shall do that. Down with you, and you conspire with him against me, do you, viper? There, that is work fit for you." He shook me till my teeth rattled, and pitched me beside Joseph, who steadily concluded his supplications, and then rose, vowing he would set off for the Grange directly. Mr. Linton was a magistrate, and though he had 50 wives dead, he should inquire into this. He was so obstinate in his resolution that Heathcliff deemed it expedient to compel from my lips a recapitulation of what had taken place, standing over me, heaving with malevolence, as I reluctantly delivered the account in answer to his questions. It required a great deal of labor to satisfy the old man that he was not the aggressor, especially with my hardly wrung replies. However, Mr. Earnshaw soon convinced him that he was alive still. He hastened to administer a dose of spirits, and by their succor his master presently regained motion and consciousness. Heathcliff, aware that he was ignorant of the treatment received while insensible, called him deliriously intoxicated, and said he should not notice his atrocious conduct further, but advised him to get to bed. To my joy he left us after giving this judicious counsel, and Henley stretched himself on the hearthstone. I departed to my own room, marvelling that I had escaped so easily. This morning, when I came down, about half an hour before noon, Mr. Earnshaw was sitting by the fire, deadly sick. His evil genius, almost as gaunt and ghastly, leant against the chimney. Neither appeared inclined to dine, and having waited till all was cold on the table, I commenced alone. Nothing hindered me from eating heartily, and I experienced a certain sense of satisfaction and superiority as at intervals I cast a look towards my silent companions, and felt the comfort of a quiet conscience within me. After I had done, I ventured on the usual liberty of drawing near the fire, going round Earnshaw's seat and kneeling in the corner beside him. Heathcliff did not glance my way, and I gazed up and contemplated his features almost as confidently as if they had been turned to stone. His forehead, that I once thought so manly, and that I now think so diabolical, was shaded with a heavy cloud. His basilisk eyes were nearly quenched by sleeplessness, and weeping, perhaps, for the lashes were wet then. His lips devoid of their ferocious sneer, and sealed in an expression of unspeakable sadness. Had it been another, I would have covered my face in the presence of such grief. In his case, I was gratified, and ignoble as it seems to insult a fallen enemy, I couldn't miss this chance of sticking in a dart. His weakness was the only time when I could taste the delight of paying wrong for wrong. Fie, miss, I interrupted. One might suppose you had never opened a Bible in your life. If God afflict your enemies, surely that ought to suffice you. It is both mean and presumptuous to add your torture to his. In general, I'll allow that it would be, Ellen, she continued, but what misery laid on Heathcliff could content me, unless I have a hand in it. I'd rather he suffered less, if I might cause his sufferings, and he might know that I was the cause. Oh, I owe him so much. On only one condition can I hope to forgive him. It is, if I may take an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, for every wrench of agony return a wrench, reduce him to my level. As he was the first to injure, make him the first to implore pardon. And then, why then, Ellen, I might show you some generosity. But it is utterly impossible I can ever be revenged, and therefore I cannot forgive him. Henley wanted some water, and I handed him a glass and asked him how he was. Not as ill as I wish, he replied, but leaving out my arm, every inch of me is as sore as if I had been fighting with a legion of imps. Yes, no wonder, was my next remark. Catherine used to boast that she stood between you and bodily harm. She meant that certain persons would not hurt you for fear of offending her. It's well people don't really rise from their grave, or last night she might have witnessed a repulsive scene. Are not you bruised and cut over your chest and shoulders? I can't say, he answered. But what do you mean? Did he dare to strike me when I was down? He trampled on, and kicked you, and dashed you on the ground, I whispered, and his mouth watered to tear you with his teeth, because he's only half a man, not so much. Mr. Earnshaw looked up, like me, to the countenance of our mutual foe, who, absorbed in his anguish, seemed insensible to anything around him. The longer he stood, the plainer his reflections revealed their blackness through his features. Oh, if God would but give me strength to strangle him in my last agony, I'd go to hell with joy, groaned the impatient man, writhing to rise, and sinking back in despair, convinced of his inadequacy for that struggle. Nay, it's enough that he has murdered one of you, I observed aloud. At the Grange, everyone knows your sister would have been living now, had it not been for Mr. Heathcliff. After all, it is preferable to be hated than loved by him. When I recollect how happy we were, how happy Catherine was, before he came, I'm fit to curse the day. More likely, Heathcliff noticed more the truth of what was said than the spirit of the person who said it. His attention was roused, I saw, for his eyes rained down tears among the ashes, and he drew his breath in suffocating sighs. I stared full at him and laughed scornfully. The clouded windows of hell flashed a moment towards me. The fiend, which usually looked out, however, was so dimmed and drowned that I did not fear to hazard another sound of derision. Get up and be gone out of my sight, said the mourner. I guessed he uttered those words, at least, though his voice was hardly intelligible. I beg your pardon, I replied, but I loved Catherine too, and her brother requires attendance, which for her sake I shall supply. Now that she's dead, I see her in Hindley. Hindley has exactly her eyes, and if you had not tried to gouge them out and make them black and red, and her— Get up, wretched idiot, before I stamp you to death, he cried, making a movement that caused me to make one also. But then, I continued, holding myself ready to flee, if poor Catherine had trusted you and assumed the ridiculous, contemptible, degrading title of Mrs. Heathcliff, she would soon have presented a similar picture. She wouldn't have borne your abominable behavior quietly. Her detestation and disgust must have found voice. The back of the settee and Earnshaw's person interposed between me and him. So instead of endeavoring to reach me, he snatched a dinner knife from the table and flung it at my head. It struck beneath my ear and stopped the sentence I was uttering, but pulling it out, I sprang to the door and delivered another which I hope went a little deeper than his missile. The last glimpse I caught of him was a furious rush on his part, checked by the embrace of his host, and both fell locked together on the hearth. In my flight through the kitchen, I bid Joseph speed to his master. I knocked over Hareton, who was hanging a litter of puppies from a chair back in the doorway, and blessed as a soul escaped from purgatory, I bounded, leaped, and flew down the steep road. Then, quitting its windings, shot directly across the moor, rolling over banks, and wading through marshes, precipitating myself, in fact, towards the beacon light of the Grange. And far rather would I be condemned to a perpetual dwelling in the infernal regions, than even for one night abide beneath the roof of Wuthering Heights again. Isabella ceased speaking, and took a drink of tea. Then she rose, and bidding me put on her bonnet and a great shawl I had brought, and turning a deaf ear to my entreaties for her to remain another hour, she stepped on to a chair, kissed Edgar's and Catherine's portraits, bestowed a similar salute on me, and descended to the carriage accompanied by Fanny, who yelped wild with joy at recovering her mistress. She was driven away, never to revisit this neighbourhood, but a regular correspondence was established between her and my master when things were more settled. I believe her new abode was in the south, near London. There she had a son born, a few months subsequent to her escape. He was christened Linton, and from the first she reported him to be an ailing, peevish creature. Mr. Heathcliff, meeting me one day in the village, inquired where she lived. I refused to tell. He remarked that it was not of any moment, only she must beware of coming to her brother. She should not be with him, if he had to keep her himself. Though I would give no information, he discovered, through some of the other servants, both her place of residence and the existence of the child. Still, he didn't molest her, for which forbearance she might thank his aversion, I suppose. He often asked about the infant when he saw me, and on hearing its name, smiled grimly and observed, "They wish me to hate it too, do they?" "I don't think they wish you to know anything about it," I answered. "But I'll have it," he said, "when I want it. They may reckon on that." Fortunately, its mother died before the time arrived, some 13 years after the decease of Catherine, when Linton was 12, or a little more. On the day succeeding Isabella's unexpected visit, I had no opportunity of speaking to my master. He shunned conversation, and was fit for discussing nothing. When I could get him to listen, I saw it pleased him that his sister had left her husband, whom he abhorred with an intensity which the mildness of his nature would scarcely seem to allow. So deep and sensitive was his aversion that he refrained from going anywhere where he was likely to see or hear of Heathcliff. Grief, and that together, transformed him into a complete hermit. He threw up his office of magistrate, ceased even to attend church, avoided the village on all occasions, and spent a life of entire seclusion within the limits of his park and grounds, only varied by solitary rambles on the moors and visits to the grave of his wife, mostly at evening, or early morning, before other wanderers were abroad. But he was too good to be thoroughly unhappy long. He didn't pray for Catherine's soul to haunt him. Time brought resignation, and a melancholy sweeter than common joy. He recalled her memory with ardent, tender love, and hopeful aspiring to the better world, where he doubted not she was gone. And he had earthly consolation and affections also. For a few days, I said, he seemed regardless of the puny successor to the departed. That coldness melted as fast as snow in April, and ere the tiny thing could stammer a word or totter a step, it wielded a despot's sceptre in his heart. It was named Catherine, but he never called the name in full, as he had never called the first Catherine short. probably because Heathcliff had a habit of doing so. The little one was always Cathy. It formed to him a distinction from the mother, and yet a connection with her, and his attachment sprang from its relation to her far more than from its being his own. I used to draw a comparison between him and Hindley Earnshaw, and perplexed myself to explain satisfactorily why their conduct was so opposite in similar circumstances. They had both been fond husbands, and were both attached to their children, and I could not see how they shouldn't both have taken the same road, for good or evil. But I thought in my mind, Hindley, with apparently the stronger head, has shown himself sadly the worse and weaker man. When his ship struck, the captain abandoned his post, and the crew, instead of trying to save her, rushed into riot and confusion, leaving no hope for their luckless vessel. Linton, on the contrary, displayed the true courage of a loyal and faithful soul. He trusted God, and God comforted him. One hoped, and the other despaired. They chose their own lots, and were righteously doomed to endure them. But you'll not want to hear my moralizing, Mr. Lockwood. You'll judge as well as I can all these things. At least, you'll think you will, and that's the same. The end of Earnshaw was what might have been expected, and followed fast on his sister's. There was scarcely 6 months between them. We, at the Grange, never got a very succinct account of his state preceding it. All that I did learn was on occasion of going to aid in the preparations for the funeral. Mr. Kenneth came to announce the event to my master. "Well, Nelly," said he, riding into the yard one morning, too early not to alarm me with an instant presentiment of bad news, "it's yours and my turn to go into mourning at present. Who's given us the slip now, do you think?" "Who?" I asked in a flurry. "Why, guess," he returned, dismounting and slinging his bridle on a hook by the door. "And nip up the corner of your apron. I'm certain you'll need it." "Not Mr. Heathcliff, surely!" I exclaimed. "What, would you have tears for him?" said the doctor. "No, Heathcliff's a tough young fellow. He looks bloomy to-day. I've just seen him. He's rapidly regaining flesh since he lost his better half." "Who is it then, Mr. Kenneth?" I repeated impatiently. "Hindley Earnshaw, your old friend Hindley," he replied, "and my wicked gossip, though he's been too wild for me this long while. There, I said we should draw water, but cheer up. He died true to his character, drunk as a lord. Poor lad, I'm sorry too. One can't help missing an old companion, though he had the worst tricks with him that ever a man imagined, and has done me many a rascally turn. He's barely 27, it seems. That's your own age. Who would have thought you were born in 1 year?" I confess this blow was greater to me than the shock of Mrs. Linton's death. Ancient associations lingered round my heart. I sat down in the porch and wept as for a blood relation, desiring Kenneth to get another servant to introduce him to the master. I could not hinder myself from pondering on the question. Had he had fair play? Whatever I did, that idea would bother me. It was so tirelessly pernicious that I resolved on requesting to leave to go to Wuthering Heights and assist in the last duties to the dead. Mr. Linton was extremely reluctant to consent, but I pleaded eloquently for the friendless condition in which he lay, and I said my old master and foster brother had a claim on my services as strong as his own. Besides, I reminded him that the child, Hareton, was his wife's nephew, and in the absence of nearer kin he ought to act as its guardian, and he ought to and must inquire how the property was left, and look over the concerns of his brother-in-law. He was unfit for attending to such matters then, but he bid me speak to his lawyer, and at length permitted me to go. His lawyer had been Earnshaw's also. I called at the village and asked him to accompany me. He shook his head, and advised that Heathcliff should be let alone, affirming, if the truth were known, Hareton would be found little else than a beggar. His father died in debt, he said. The whole property is mortgaged, and the sole chance for the natural heir is to allow him an opportunity of creating some interest in the creditor's heart, that he may be inclined to deal leniently towards him. When I reached the Heights, I exclaimed that I had come to see everything carried on decently, and Joseph, who appeared in sufficient distress, expressed satisfaction at my presence. Mr. Heathcliff said he did not perceive that I was wanted, but I might stay and order the arrangements for the funeral, if I chose. Correctly, he remarked, that fool's body should be buried at the crossroads, without ceremony of any kind. I happened to leave him 10 minutes yesterday afternoon, and in that interval he fastened the 2 doors of the house against me, and he spent the night in drinking himself to death deliberately. We broke in this morning, for we heard him snorting like a horse, and there he was, laid over the settee, flaying, and the scalping would not have wakened him. I sent for Kenneth, and he came, but not till the beast had changed into carrion. He was both dead and cold and stark, and so you'll allow it was useless making more stir about him. The old servant confirmed the statement, but muttered, "Oh, rather he'd gone himself for the doctor. I saw it on tenement as master better nor than him. He wasn't dead when I left, now to the sort." I insisted on the funeral being respectable. Mr. Heathcliff said I might have my own way there too, only he desired me to remember that the money for the whole affair came out of his pocket. He maintained a hard, careless deportment, indicative of neither joy nor sorrow. If anything, it expressed a flinty gratification at a piece of difficult work successfully executed. I observed once, indeed, something like exultation in his aspect. It was just when the people were bearing the coffin from the house. He had the hypocrisy to represent a mourner, and previous to following with Hareton, he lifted the unfortunate child onto the table, and muttered with peculiar gusto, "Now, my bonny lad, you are mine, and we'll see if one tree won't grow as crooked as another with the same wind to twist it." The unsuspecting thing was pleased at this speech. He played with Heathcliff's whiskers, and stroked his cheek, but I divined its meaning, and observed, tartly, "That boy must go back with me to Thrushcross Grange, sir. There is nothing in the world less yours than he is." "Does Linton say so?" he demanded. "Of course. He has ordered me to take him," I replied. "Well," said the scoundrel, "we'll not argue the subject now. But I have a fancy to try my hand at rearing a young one, so intimate to your master that I must supply the place of this with my own, if he attempt to remove it. I don't engage to let Hareton go undisputed, but I'll be pretty sure to make the other come. Remember to tell him." This hint was enough to bind our hands. I repeated its substance on my return, and Edgar Linton, little interested at the commencement, spoke no more of interfering. I'm not aware that he could have done it to any purpose, had he been ever so willing. The guest was now the master of Wuthering Heights. He held firm possession, and proved to the attorney, who in his turn proved it to Mr. Linton, that Earnshaw had mortgaged every yard of land he owned for cash to supply his mania for gaming, and he, Heathcliff, was the mortgagee. In that matter, Hareton, who should now be the first gentleman in the neighbourhood, was reduced to a state of complete dependence on his father's inveterate enemy, and lives in his own house as a servant deprived of the advantages of wages, and quite unable to right himself, because of his friendlessness and his ignorance that he has been wronged. Chapter 4. The 12 years, continued Mrs. Dean, following that dismal period, were the happiest of my life. My greatest troubles in their passage rose from our little lady's trifling illnesses, which she had to experience in common with all children, rich and poor. For the rest, after the first 6 months, she grew like a larch, and could walk and talk too in her own way, before the heath blossomed a second time, over Mrs. Linton's dust. She was the most winning thing that ever brought sunshine into a desolate house, a real beauty in face. But the Earnshaw's handsome dark eyes, but the Lintons' fair skin and small features, and yellow curling hair. Her spirit was high, though not rough, and qualified by a heart sensitive and lively to excess in its affections. That capacity for intense attachments reminded me of her mother. Still, she did not resemble her, for she could be soft and mild as a dove, and she had a gentle voice and pensive expression. Her anger was never furious, her love never fierce, it was deep and tender. However, it must be acknowledged she had faults to foil her gifts. A propensity to be saucy was one, and a perverse will that indulged children invariably acquire, whether they be good-tempered or cross. If a servant chanced to vex her, it was always, "I shall tell papa." And if he reproved her, even by a look, you would have thought it a heart-breaking business. I don't believe he ever did speak a harsh word to her. He took her education entirely on himself and made it an amusement. Fortunately, curiosity and a quick intellect urged her into an apt scholar. She learnt rapidly and eagerly and did honor to his teaching. Till she reached the age of 13, she had not once been beyond the range of the park by herself. Mr. Linton would take her with him, a mile or so outside, on rare occasions, but he trusted her to no one else. Gimmerton was an unsubstantial name in her ears. The chapel, only building she had approached or entered, except her own home. Wuthering Heights and Mr. Heathcliff did not exist for her. She was a perfect recluse, and apparently perfectly contented. Sometimes, indeed, while surveying the country from her nursery window, she would observe, "Ellen, how long will it be before I can walk to the top of those hills? I wonder what lies on the other side. Is it the sea?" "No, Miss Cathy," I would answer, "it is hills again, just like these." "And what are those golden rocks like when you stand under them?" she once asked. The abrupt descent of Penistone Crags particularly attracted her notice, especially when the setting sun shone on it and the topmost heights, and the whole extent of landscape beside lay in shadow. I explained that they were bare masses of stone, with hardly enough earth in their clefts to nourish a stunted tree. "And why are they bright so long after it is evening here?" she pursued. "Because they are a great deal higher up than we are," replied I. "You could not climb them, they are too high and steep. In winter the frost is always there before it comes to us, and deep into summer I have found snow under that block hollow on the northeast side." "Oh, you've been on them!" she cried gleefully. "Then I can go too when I am a woman. Has papa been, Ellen?" "Papa would tell you, miss," I answered hastily, "that they are not worth the trouble of visiting. The moors, where you ramble with him, are much nicer, and Thrushcross Park is the finest place in the world." "But I know the park, and I don't know those," she murmured to herself, "and I should delight to look round me from the brow of that tallest point. My little pony, Minnie, shall take me some time." One of the maids, mentioning the fairy cave, quite turned her head with a desire to fulfill this project. She teased Mr. Linton about it, and he promised she should have the journey when she got older, but Miss Catherine measured her age by months, and "Now, am I old enough to go to Penistone Crags?" was the constant question in her mouth. The road thither wound close by Wuthering Heights. Edgar had not the heart to pass it, so she received as constantly the answer, "Not yet, love, not yet." I said Mrs. Heathcliff lived about above a dozen years after quitting her husband. Her family were of a delicate constitution. She and Edgar both lacked the ruddy health that you will generally meet in these parts. What her last illness was, I am not certain. I conjecture they died of the same thing, a kind of fever, slow at its commencement, but incurable, and rapidly consuming life towards the close. She wrote to inform her brother of the probable conclusion of a 4 months' indisposition under which she had suffered, and entreated him to come to her, if possible, for she had much to settle, and wished to bid him adieu, and deliver Linton safely into his hands. Her hope was that Linton might be left with him, as he had been with her. His father, she would fain convince herself, had no desire to assume the burden of his maintenance or education. My master hesitated not a moment in complying with her request. Reluctant as he was to leave home at ordinary calls, he flew to answer this, commending Catherine to my peculiar vigilance in his absence, with reiterated orders that she must not wander out of the park, even under my escort. He did not calculate on her going unaccompanied. He was away 3 weeks. The first day or two my charge sat in a corner of the library, too sad for either reading or playing. In that quiet state she caused me little trouble, but it was succeeded by an interval of impatient, fretful weariness, and being too busy and too old then to run up and down amusing herself, I hit on a method by which she might entertain herself. I used to send her on her travels round the grounds, now on foot and now on a pony, indulging her with a patient audience of all her real and imaginary adventures when she returned. The summer shone in full prime, and she took such a taste for this solitary rambling that she often contrived to remain out from breakfast till tea, and then the evenings were spent in recounting her fanciful tales. I did not fear her breaking bounds, because the gates were generally locked, and I thought she would scarcely venture forth alone if they had stood wide open. Unluckily, my confidence proved misplaced. Catherine came to me one morning at 8 o'clock and said she was that day an Arabian merchant going to cross the desert with his caravan, and I must give her plenty of provision for herself and beasts, a horse and 3 camels, personated by a large hound and a couple of pointers. I got together a good store of dainties and slung them in a basket on one side of the saddle, and she sprang up as gay as a fairy, sheltered by her wide-brimmed hat and gauze veil from the July sun, and trotted off with a merry laugh, mocking my cautious counsel to avoid galloping, and come back early. The naughty thing never made her appearance at tea. One traveller, the hound, being an old dog and fond of its ease, returned, but neither Cathy, nor the pony, nor the 2 pointers were visible in any direction, and I dispatched emissaries down this path and that path, and at last went wandering in search of her myself. There was a labourer working at a fence round a plantation on the borders of the grounds. I inquired of him if he had seen our young lady. I saw her at morn, he replied. She would have me to cut her a hazel switch, and then she leapt her galloway over the hedge yonder, where it is lowest, and galloped out of sight. You may guess how I felt at hearing this news, and it struck me directly she must have started for Penistone Crags. "What will become of her?" I ejaculated, pushing through a gap which the man was repairing, and making straight to the high road. I walked as if for a wager, mile after mile, till a turn brought me in view of the heights, but no Catherine could I detect, far or near. The crags lie about 1.5 miles beyond Mr. Heathcliff's place, and that is 4 from the Grange, so I began to fear night would fall ere I could reach them. And what if she should have slipped in clambering among them, I reflected, and has been killed, or broken some of her bones? My suspense was truly painful, and at first it gave me delightful relief to observe, in hurrying by the farmhouse, Charlie, the fiercest of the pointers, lying under a window with swelled head and bleeding ear. I opened the wicket and ran to the door, knocking vehemently for admittance. A woman whom I knew, and who formerly lived at Gimmerton, answered. She had been servant there since the death of Mr. Earnshaw. "Ah," said she, "you are come a-seeking your little mistress. Don't be frightened. She's here safe, but I'm glad it isn't the master." "He's not at home, then, is he?" I panted, quite breathless with quick walking and alarm. No, no, she replied. Both he and Joseph are off, and I think they won't return this hour or more. Step in and rest you a bit. I entered and beheld my stray lamb, seated on the hearth, rocking herself in a little chair that had been her mother's when a child. Her hat was hung against the wall, and she seemed perfectly at home, laughing and chattering in the best spirits imaginable to Hareton, now a great, strong lad of 18, who stared at her with considerable curiosity and astonishment, comprehending precious little of the fluent succession of remarks and questions which her tongue never ceased pouring forth. "Very well, miss," I exclaimed, concealing my joy under an angry countenance. "This is your last ride till papa comes back. I'll not trust you over the threshold again, you naughty, naughty girl." "Aha, Ellen!" she cried, gaily jumping up and running to my side. "I shall have a pretty story to tell to-night. And so you found me out. Have you ever been here in your life before?" "Put that hat on and come home at once," said I. "I'm dreadfully grieved at you, Miss Cathy. You've done extremely wrong. It's no use pouting and crying. That won't repay the trouble I've had scouring the country after you. To think how Mr. Linton charged me to keep you in, and you stealing off so. It shows you are a cunning little fox, and nobody will put faith in you any more." "What have I done?" sobbed she, instantly checked. "Papa charged me nothing. He'll not scold me, Ellen. He's never cross like you." "Come, come," I repeated. "I'll tie the riband. Now let us have no petulance. Oh, for shame! You are 13 years old and such a baby." This exclamation was caused by her pushing the hat from her head and retreating to the chimney out of my reach. "Nay," said the servant, "don't be hard on the bonny lass, Miss Dean. We made her stop. She'd fain have ridden forwards, afeard you should be uneasy, but Hareton offered to go with her, and I thought he should. It's a wild road over the hills." Hareton, during the discussion, stood with his hands in his pockets, too awkward to speak, though he looked as if he did not relish my intrusion. "How long am I to wait?" I continued, disregarding the woman's interference. "It will be dark in 10 minutes. Where is the pony, Miss Cathy? And where is Phoenix? I shall leave you unless you be quick, so please yourself." "The pony's in the yard," she replied, "and Phoenix is shut in there. He's bitten, and so is Charlie. I was going to tell you all about it, but you are in a bad temper and don't deserve to hear." I picked up her hat and approached to reinstate it, but perceiving that the people of the house took her part, she commenced capering round the room, and on my giving chase, ran like a mouse over and under and behind the furniture, rendering it ridiculous for me to pursue. Hareton and the woman laughed, and she joined them, and waxed more impertinent still, till I cried in great irritation, "Well, Miss Cathy, if you were aware whose house this is, you'd be glad enough to get out." "It's your father's, isn't it?" she said, turning to Hareton. "Nay," he replied, looking down and blushing bashfully. He could not stand a steady gaze from her eyes, though they were just his own. "Whose then? Your master's?" she asked. He colored deeper, with a different feeling, muttered an oath, and turned away. "Who is his master?" continued the tiresome girl, appealing to me. "He talked about our house and our folk. I thought he had been the owner's son, and he never said, miss. He should have done, shouldn't he, if he's a servant?" Hareton grew black as a thundercloud at this childish speech. I silently shook my questioner, and at last succeeded in equipping her for departure. "Now get my horse," she said, addressing her unknown kinsman as she would one of the stable boys at the Grange, "and you may come with me. I want to see where the goblin hunter rises in the marsh, and to hear about the fairies, as you call them. But make haste. What's the matter? Get my horse, I say." "I'll see thee damned before I be thy servant," growled the lad. "You'll see me what?" asked Catherine in surprise. "Damned, thou saucy witch," he replied. "There, Miss Cathy, you see you have got into pretty company," I interposed. Nice words to be used to a young lady. Pray, don't begin to dispute with him. Come, let us seek Minnie for ourselves, and be gone." "But, Ellen," cried she, staring fixed in astonishment, "how dare he speak so to me? Mustn't he be made to do as I ask him? You wicked creature, I shall tell papa what you said. Now then." Hareton did not appear to feel this threat, so the tears sprung into her eyes with indignation. "You bring the pony," she exclaimed, turning to the woman, "and let my dog free this moment." "Softly, miss," answered the address. "You'll lose nothing by being civil. Though Mr. Hareton there be not the master's son, he's your cousin, and I was never hired to serve you." "He my cousin?" cried Kathy, with a scornful laugh. "Yes, indeed," responded her reprover. "Oh, Ellen, don't let them say such things," she pursued in great trouble. "Papa is gone to fetch my cousin from London. My cousin is a gentleman's son. She stopped and wept outright, upset at the bare notion of relationship with such clown. "Hush, hush," I whispered. "People can have many cousins and of all sorts, Miss Kathy, without being any worse for it. Only they needn't keep their company if they be disagreeable and bad." He's not my cousin Ellen," she went on, gathering fresh grief from reflection, and flinging herself into my arms for refuge from the idea. I was much vexed at her and the servant for their mutual revelations, having no doubt of Linton's approaching arrival, communicated by the former, being reported to Mr. Heathcliff, and feeling as confident that Catherine's first thought on her father's return would be to seek an explanation of the latter's assertion concerning her rude-bred kindred. Hareton, recovering from his disgust at being taken for a servant, seemed moved by her distress, and having fetched the pony round to the door, he took, to propitiate her, a fine, crooked-legged terrier whelp from the kennel, and putting it into her hand, bid her wished, for he meant naught. Pausing in her lamentations, she surveyed him with a glance of awe and horror, then burst forth anew. I could scarcely refrain from smiling at this antipathy to the poor fellow, who was a well-made, athletic youth, good-looking in features, and stout and healthy, but attired in garments befitting his daily occupations of working on the farm, and lounging among the moors after rabbits and game. Still, I thought I could detect in his physiognomy a mind owning better qualities than his father ever possessed. Good things lost amid a wilderness of weeds, to be sure, whose rankness far overtopped their neglected growth, yet, notwithstanding, evidence of a wealthy soil that might yield luxuriant crops under other unfavourable circumstances. Mr. Heathcliff, I believe, had not treated him physically ill, thanks to his fearless nature, which offered no temptation to that course of oppression. It had none of the timid susceptibility that would have given zest to ill treatment in Heathcliff's judgment. He appeared to have bent his malevolence on making him a brute. He was never taught to read or write, never rebuked for any bad habit which did not annoy his keeper, never led a single step towards virtue, or guarded by a single precept against vice. And from what I heard, Joseph contributed much to his deterioration by a narrow-minded partiality which prompted him to flatter and pet him as a boy because he was the head of the old family. And as he had been in the habit of accusing Catherine Earnshaw and Heathcliff, when children, of putting the master past his patience, and compelling him to sing solace and drink by what he termed their awful ways, so at present he laid the whole burden of Hareton's faults on the shoulders of the usurper of his property. If the lad swore, he wouldn't correct him, nor however culpably he behaved. It gave Joseph satisfaction, apparently, to watch him go the worst lengths. He allowed that he was ruined, that his soul was abandoned to perdition, but then he reflected that Heathcliff must answer for it. Hareton's blood would be required at his hands, and there lay immense consolation in that thought. Joseph had instilled into him a pride of name and of his lineage. He would, had he dared, have fostered hate between him and the present owner of the Heights, but his dread of that owner amounted to superstition, and he confined his feelings regarding him to muttered innuendos and private combinations. I don't pretend to be intimately acquainted with the mode of living customary in those days at Wuthering Heights. I only speak from hearsay, for I saw little. The villagers affirmed Mr. Heathcliff was near, and a cruel, hard landlord to his tenants. But the house inside had regained its ancient aspect of comfort under female management, and the scenes of riot common in Hindley's time were not now enacted within its walls. The master was too gloomy to seek companionship with any people, good or bad, and he is yet. This, however, is not making progress with my story. Miss Cathy rejected the peace offering of the terrier, and demanded her own dogs, Charlie and Phoenix. They came limping and hanging their heads, and we set out for home, sadly out of sorts, every one of us. I could not wring from my little lady how she had spent the day, except that, as I supposed, the goal of her pilgrimage was Penistone Crag, and she arrived without adventure to the gate of the farmhouse, when Hareton happened to issue forth, attended by some canine followers, who attacked her train. They had a smart battle before their owners could separate them. That formed an introduction. Catherine told Hareton who she was, and where she was going, and asked him to show her the way, finally beguiling him to accompany her. He opened the mysteries of the fairy cave, and 20 other queer places, but being in disgrace, I was not favored with the description of the interesting objects she saw. I could gather, however, that her guide had been a favorite till she hurt his feelings by addressing him as a servant, and Heathcliff's housekeeper hurt hers by calling him her cousin. Then the language he had held to her rankled in her heart, she who was always love, and darling, and queen, and angel with everybody at the Grange, to be insulted so shockingly by a stranger. She did not comprehend it, and hard work I had to obtain a promise that she would not lay the grievance before her father. I explained how he objected to the whole household at the Heights, and how sorry he would be to find she had been there, but insisted most on the fact that if she revealed my negligence of his orders, he would perhaps be so angry that I should have to leave. And Cathy couldn't bear that prospect. She pledged her word and kept it for my sake. After all, she was a sweet little girl. Chapter 5. A letter, edged with black, announced the day of my master's return. Isabella was dead, and he wrote to bid me get mourning for his daughter, and arrange a room and other accommodations for his youthful nephew. Catherine ran wild with joy at the idea of welcoming her father back, and indulged most sanguine anticipations of the innumerable excellencies of her real cousin. The evening of their expected arrival came. Since early morning she had been busy, ordering her own small affairs, and now, attired in her new black frock, poor thing, her aunt's death impressed her with no definite sorrow, she obliged me by constant worrying to walk with her down through the grounds to meet them. Linton is just 6 months younger than I am, she chattered, as we strolled leisurely over the swells and hollows of mossy turf, under shadows of the trees. How delightful it will be to have him for a playfellow. Aunt Isabella sent Papa a beautiful lock of his hair. It was lighter than mine, more flaxen, and quite as fine. I have it carefully preserved in a little glass box, and I've often thought what pleasure it would be to see its owner. Oh, I am happy. And Papa, dear, dear Papa. Come, Ellen, let us run. Come, run. She ran and returned and ran again many times before my sober footsteps reached the gate, and then she seated herself on the grassy bank beside the path and tried to wait patiently, but that was impossible. She couldn't be still a minute. "How long they are!" she exclaimed. "Ah, I see some dust on the road. They are coming. No. When will they be here? May we not go a little way? "Half a mile, Ellen? Only just half a mile. Do say yes, to that clump of birches at the turn." I refused staunchly, and at length her suspense was ended. The travelling carriage rolled in sight. Miss Cathy shrieked and stretched out her arms as soon as she caught her father's face looking from the window. He descended, nearly as eager as herself, and a considerable interval elapsed ere they had a thought to spare for any but themselves. While they exchanged caresses, I took a peep in to see after Linton. He was asleep in a corner, wrapped in a warm, fur-lined cloak as if it had been winter. A pale, delicate, effeminate boy, who might have been taken for my master's younger brother, so strong was the resemblance. But there was a sickly peevishness in his aspect that Edgar Linton never had. The latter saw me looking, and having shaken hands, advised me to close the door and leave him undisturbed, for the journey had fatigued him. Cathy would fain have taken one glance, but her father told her to come on, and they walked together up the park while I hastened before to prepare the servants. "Now, darling," said Mr. Linton, addressing his daughter, as they halted at the bottom of the front steps, "your cousin is not so strong or as merry as you are, and he has lost his mother. Remember, a very short time since. Therefore, don't expect him to play and run about with you directly, and don't harass him much by talking. Let him be quiet this evening, at least, will you?" "Yes, yes, papa," answered Catherine, "but I do want to see him, and he hasn't looked out once." The carriage stopped, and the sleeper, being roused, was lifted to the ground by his uncle. "This is your cousin Cathy, Linton," he said, putting their little hands together. "She's fond of you already, and mind you don't grieve her by crying tonight. Try to be cheerful now. The travelling is at an end, and you have nothing to do but rest and amuse yourself as you please." "Let me go to bed, then," answered the boy, shrinking from Catherine's salute, and he put his fingers to his eyes to remove incipient tears. "Come, come, there's a good child," I whispered, leading him in. "You'll make her weep too. See how sorry she is for you." I do not know whether it were sorrow for him, but his cousin put on as sad a countenance as himself, and returned to her father. All three entered, and mounted to the library, where tea was laid ready. I proceeded to remove Linton's cap and mantle, and placed him on a chair by the table, but he was no sooner seated than he began to cry afresh. My master inquired what was the matter. "I can't sit on a chair," sobbed the boy. "Go to the sofa, then, and Ellen shall bring you some tea," answered his uncle patiently. He had been greatly tried during the journey, I felt convinced, by his fretful, ailing charge. Linton slowly trailed himself off and lay down. Cathy carried a footstool and her cup to his side. At first she sat silent, but that could not last. She had resolved to make a pet of her little cousin, as she would have him to be, and she commenced stroking his curls and kissing his cheek and offering him tea in her saucer like a baby. This pleased him, for he was not much better. He dried his eyes and lightened into a faint smile. "Oh, he'll do very well," said the master to me after watching them a minute. "Very well if we can keep him, Ellen. The company of a child his own age will instill new spirit into him soon, and by wishing for strength he'll gain it." "Aye, if we can keep him," I mused to myself, and sore misgivings came over me that there was slight hope of that. And then, I thought, however will that weakling live at Wuthering Heights between his father and Hareton? What playmates and instructors they'll be! Our doubts were presently decided, even earlier than I expected. I had just taken the children upstairs after tea was finished, and seen Linton asleep. He would not suffer me to leave him till that was the case. I had come down, and was standing by the table in the hall, lighting a bedroom candle for Mr. Edgar, when a maid stepped out of the kitchen, and informed me that Mr. Heathcliff's servant Joseph was at the door, and wished to speak with the master. "I shall ask him what he wants first," I said, in considerable trepidation. A very unlikely hour to be troubling people, and the instant they have returned from a long journey. I don't think the master can see him. Joseph had advanced through the kitchen, as I uttered these words, and now presented himself in the hall. He was donned in his Sunday garments, with his most sanctimonious and sourest face, and holding his hat in one hand, and his stick in the other, he proceeded to clean his shoes on the mat. "Good evening, Joseph," I said coldly. "What business brings you here tonight?" "It's Master Linton on one spaital," he answered, waving me disdainfully aside. "Mr. Linton is going to bed. Unless you have something particular to say, I'm sure he won't hear it now," I continued. "You had better sit down in there and entrust your message to me." Which is his room?" pursued the fellow, surveying the range of closed doors. I perceived he was bent on refusing my mediation, so very reluctantly I went up to the library and announced the unseasonable visitor, advising that he should be dismissed till next day. Mr. Linton had no time to empower me to do so, for he mounted close at my heels, and pushing into the apartment, planted himself at the far side of the table with his two fists clapped on the head of his stick, and began in an elevated tone, as if anticipating opposition. "Heathcliff has sent me for his lad, and I mustn't go back without him." Edgar Linton was silent a minute. An expression of exceeding sorrow overcast his features. He would have pitied the child on his own account, but, recalling Isabella's hopes and fears, and anxious wishes for her son, and her commendations of him to his care, he grieved bitterly at the prospect of yielding him up, and searched in his heart how it might be avoided. No plan offered itself. The very exhibition of any desire to keep him would have rendered the claimant more peremptory. There was nothing left but to resign him. However, he was not going to rouse him from his sleep. "Tell Mr. Heathcliff," he answered calmly, "that his son shall come to Wuthering Heights tomorrow. He is in bed and too tired to go the distance now. You may also tell him that the mother of Linton desired him to remain under my guardianship, and at present his health is very precarious." "No," said Joseph, giving a thud with his prop on the floor, and assuming an authoritative air. "No, that means no. Heathcliff makes a not come the mother, nor you nor, but he'll have his lad, and I'll make talk him, so you know." "You shall not to-night," answered Linton decisively. "Walk downstairs at once, and repeat to your master what I have said. Ellen, show him down. Go." And aiding the indignant elder with a lift by the arm, he rid the room of him and closed the door. "Very well," shouted Joseph, as he slowly drew off. "To mornin' he's come himself, and thrust at him if you dare." Chapter 6. To obviate the danger of this threat being fulfilled, Mr. Linton commissioned me to take the boy home early on Catherine's pony, and, said he, "As we shall now have no influence over his destiny, good or bad, you must say nothing of where he is gone to my daughter. She cannot associate with him hereafter, and it is better for her to remain in ignorance of his proximity, lest she should be restless and anxious to visit the Heights. Merely tell her his father sent for him suddenly, and he has been obliged to leave us." Linton was very reluctant to be roused from his bed at 5 o'clock, and astonished to be informed that he must prepare for further travelling. But I softened off the matter by stating that he was going to spend some time with his father, Mr. Heathcliff, who wished to see him so much he did not like to defer the pleasure till he should recover from his late journey. "My father?" he cried, in strange perplexity. "Mamma never told me I had a father. Where does he live? I'd rather stay with uncle." "He lives a little distance from the Grange," I replied, "just beyond those hills. Not so far but you may walk over here when you get hearty. And you should be glad to go home and see him. You must try to love him as you did your mother, and then he will love you." "But why have I not heard of him before?" asked Linton. Why didn't Mom and he live together, as other people do? He had business to keep him in the north, I answered, and your mother's health required her to reside in the south. And why didn't Mamma speak to me about him? Persevered the child. She often talked of Uncle, and I learnt to love him long ago. How am I to love Papa? I don't know him. Oh, all children love their parents, I said. Your mother, perhaps, thought you would want to be with him if she mentioned him often to you. Let us make haste. An early ride on such a beautiful morning is much preferable to an hour's more sleep. Is she to go with us? He demanded. The little girl I saw yesterday. Not now, replied I. Is Uncle? He continued. No, I shall be your companion there, I said. Linton sank back into his pillow and fell into a brown study. I won't go without Uncle, he cried at length. I can't tell where you mean to take me. I attempted to persuade him of the naughtiness of showing reluctance to meet his father. Still, he obstinately resisted any progress towards dressing, and I had to call for my master's assistance in coaxing him out of bed. The poor thing was finally got off with several delusive assurances that his absence should be short, that Mr. Edgar and Kathy would visit him, and other promises, equally ill-founded, which I invented and reiterated at intervals throughout the way. The pure, heather-scented air, and the bright sunshine, and the gentle canter of Minnie relieved his despondency after a while. He began to put questions concerning his new home and its inhabitants with greater interest and liveliness. Is Wuthering Heights as pleasant a place as Thrushcross Grange? He inquired, turning to take a last glance into the valley, whence a light mist mounted and formed fleecy cloud on the skirts of the blue. It is not so buried in the trees, I replied, and it is not quite so large, but you can see the country beautifully all around, and the air is healthier for you, fresher and drier. You will perhaps think the building old and dark at first, though it is a respectable house, the next best in the neighborhood, and you will have such nice rambles on the moors. Hareton Earnshaw, that is, Miss Kathy's other cousin, and so yours in a manner, will show you all the sweetest spots, and you can bring a book in fine weather, and make a green hollow your study, and now and then your uncle may join you in a walk. He does frequently walk out on the hills. And what is my father like? He asked. Is he as young and handsome as Uncle? He's as young, said I, but he has black hair and eyes, and looks sterner, and he is taller and bigger altogether. He'll not seem to you so gentle and kind at first, perhaps, because it is not his way. Still, mind you be frank and cordial with him, and naturally he'll be fonder of you than any uncle, for you are his own. Black hair and eyes, mused Linton. I can't fancy him. Then I am not much like him, am I? Not much, I answered. Not a morsel, I thought, surveying with regret the white complexion and slim frame of my companion, and his large, languid eyes. His mother's eyes, save that, unless a morbid touchiness kindled them a moment, they had not a vestige of her sparkling spirit. How strange that he should never come to see Mamma and me, he murmured. Has he ever seen me? If he have, I must have been a baby. I remember not a single thing about him. Why, Master Linton, said I, 300 miles is a great distance, and 10 years seem very different in length to a grown-up person compared with what they do to you. It is probable Mr. Heathcliff proposed going from summer to summer, but never found a convenient opportunity, and now it is too late. Don't trouble him with questions on the subject. It will disturb him for no good. The boy was fully occupied with his own cognitions for the remainder of the ride, till we halted before the farmhouse garden gate. I watched to catch his impressions in the countenance. He surveyed the carved front, the low brown lattices, the straggling gooseberry bushes and crooked firs with solemn intentness, and then shook his head. His private feelings entirely disapproved of the exterior of his new abode, but he had sense to postpone complaining. There might be compensation within. Before he dismounted, I went and opened the door. It was 6:30. The family had just finished breakfast. The servant was clearing and wiping down the table. Joseph stood by his master's chair, telling some tale concerning a lame horse, and Hareton was preparing for the hayfield. "Hallo, Nelly!" cried Mr. Heathcliff when he saw me. "I feared I should have to come down and fetch my property myself. You've brought it up, have you? Let us see what we can make of it." He got up and strode to the door. Hareton and Joseph followed in gaping curiosity. Poor Linton ran a frightened eye over the faces of the three. "Sure-ly," said Joseph, after a grave inspection, "he swapped with ye, master, and yon's his lass." Heathcliff, having stared his son into an ague of confusion, uttered a scornful laugh. "God, what a beauty! What a lovely, charming thing!" he exclaimed. "Haven't they reared it on snails and sour milk, Nelly? Oh, damn my soul, but that's worse than I expected, and the devil knows I was not sanguine." I bid the trembling and bewildered child get down and enter. He did not thoroughly comprehend the meaning of his father's speech, or whether it were intended for him. Indeed, he was not yet certain that the grim, sneering stranger was his father, but he clung to me with growing trepidation, and on Mr. Heathcliff's taking a seat and bidding him "come hither," he hid his face on my shoulder and wept. "Tut, tut," said Heathcliff, stretching out a hand and dragging him roughly between his knees, and then holding up his head by the chin. "None of that nonsense. We're not going to hurt thee, Linton. Isn't that thy name? Thou art thy mother's child entirely. Where is my share in thee, puling chicken?" He took off the boy's cap and pushed back his thick flaxen curls, felt his slender arms and small fingers, during which examination Linton ceased crying, and lifted his great blue eyes to inspect the inspector. "Do you know me?" asked Heathcliff, having satisfied himself that the limbs were all equally frail and feeble. "No," said Linton, with a gaze of vacant fear. "You've heard of me, I dare say." "No," he replied again. "No? What a shame of your mother, never to waken your filial regard for me. You are my son, then, I'll tell you, and your mother was a wicked slut to leave you in ignorance of the sort of father you possessed. Now, don't wince, and colour up. Though it is something to see you have not white blood. Be a good lad, and I'll do for you. Nelly, if you be tired, you may sit down. If not, get home again. I guess you'll report what you hear, and see to the cipher at the Grange, and this thing won't be settled while you linger about it." "Well," replied I hope you'll be kind to the boy, Mr. Heathcliff, or you'll not keep him long. And he's all you have of kin in the wide world that you will ever know. Remember." "I'll be very kind to him, you needn't fear," he said, laughing. "Only nobody else must be kind to him. I'm jealous of monopolizing his affection. And to begin my kindness, Joseph, bring the lad some breakfast. Hareton, you infernal calf, begone to your work. Yes, Nell," he added, when they were departed, "my son is prospective owner of your place, and I should not wish him to die till I was certain of being his successor. Besides, he's mine, and I want the triumph of seeing my descendant fairly lord of their estates, my child hiring their children to till their father's lands for wages. That is the sole consideration which can make me endure the whelp. I despise him for himself, and hate him for the memories he revives. But that consideration is sufficient. He is as safe with me, and shall be tended as carefully as your master tends his own. I have a room upstairs furnished for him in handsome style. I've engaged a tutor, also, to come 3 times a week, from 20 miles distance, to teach him what he pleases to learn. I've ordered Hareton to obey him, and in fact I've arranged everything with a view to preserve the superior and the gentleman in him above his associates. I do regret, however, that he so little deserves the trouble. If I wished any blessing in the world, it was to find him a worthy object of pride, and I'm bitterly disappointed with the wave-faced whining wretch." While he was speaking, Joseph returned, bearing a basin of milk porridge, and placed it before Linton. He stirred round the homely mess with a look of aversion, and affirmed he could not eat it. I saw the old man servant shared largely in his master's scorn of the child, though he was compelled to retain the sentiment in his heart, because Heathcliff plainly meant his underlings to hold him in honour. "Cannot eat it," repeated he, peering in Linton's face, and subduing his voice to a whisper, for fear of being overheard. "But Master Hareton never ate naught else, when he were a little un. And what were good enough for him's good enough for yaw, I'll rather think." "I shan't eat it," answered Linton snappishly. "Take it away." Joseph snatched up the food indignantly, and brought it to us. "Is there aught ails the victuals?" he asked, thrusting the tray under Heathcliff's nose. "What should ail them?" he said. "Why," answered Joseph, "yon dainty chap says he cannot eat 'em. But I'll guess it's right. His mother were just so. We were almost too mucky to sown to corn for making her bread." "Don't mention his mother to me," said the master angrily. "Get him something he can eat, that's all. What is his usual food, Nelly?" I suggested boiled milk or tea, and the housekeeper received instructions to prepare some. Come, I reflected, his father's selfishness may contribute to his comfort. He perceives his delicate constitution, and the necessity of treating him tolerably. I'll console Mr. Edgar by acquainting him with the turn Heathcliff's humour has taken. Having no excuse for lingering longer, I slipped out while Linton was engaged, and timidly rebuffing the advances of a friendly sheep-dog. But he was too much on the alert to be cheated. As I closed the door, I heard a cry, and a frantic repetition of the words, "Don't leave me! I'll not stay here! I'll not stay here!" Then the latch was raised, and fell. They did not suffer him to come forth. I mounted Minnie and urged her to a trot, and so my brief guardianship ended. Chapter 7. We had sad work with little Kaffy that day. She rose in high glee, eager to join her cousin, and such passionate tears and lamentations followed the news of his departure, that Edgar himself was obliged to soothe her by affirming he should come back soon. He added, however, if I can get him, and there were no hopes of that. This promise poorly pacified her, but time was more potent, and though still at intervals she inquired of her father when Linton would return, before she did see him again, his features had waxed so dim in her memory that she did not recognize him. When I chanced to encounter the housekeeper of Wuthering Heights, in paying business visits to Gimmerton, I used to ask how the young master got on, for he lived almost as secluded as Catherine herself, and was never to be seen. I could gather from her that he continued in weak health, and was a tiresome inmate. She said Mr. Heathcliff seemed to dislike him ever longer and worse, though he took some trouble to conceal it. He had an antipathy to the sound of his voice, and could not do it all with his sitting in the same room with him many minutes together. There seldom passed much talk between them. Linton learned his lessons, and spent his evenings in a small apartment they called the parlour, or else lay in bed all day, for he was constantly getting coughs and colds and aches and pains of some sort. "And I never knew such a faint-hearted creature," added the woman, "nor one so careful of his'n. He will go on if I leave the window open a bit late in the evening. Oh, it's killing a breath of night air. And he must have a fire in the middle of summer. And Joseph's bacca-pipe is poison. He must always have sweets and dainties, and always milk, milk forever, heeding not how the rest of us are pinched in winter. and there he'll sit, wrapped in his fur cloak in his chair by the fire, and some toast and water or other slop on the hob to sip at. And if Hareton for pity comes to amuse him, Hareton is not bad-natured, though he's rough. They're sure to part, one swearing and the other crying. I believe the master would relish Earnshaw's thrashing him to a mummy if he were not his son, and I'm certain he would be fit to turn him out of doors if he knew half the nursing he gives himself. But then he won't go into danger of temptation. He never enters the parlour, and should Linton show those ways in the house where he is, he sends him upstairs directly. I divined from this account that utter lack of sympathy had rendered young Heathcliff selfish and disagreeable, as if he were not so originally, and my interest in him, consequently, decayed, though still I was moved with a sense of grief at his lot, and a wish that he had been left with us. Mr. Edgar encouraged me to gain information. He thought a great deal about him, I fancy, and would have run some risk to see him, and he once told me to ask the housekeeper whether he ever came into the village. She said he had only been twice, on horseback, accompanying his father, and both times he pretended to be quite knocked up for 3 or 4 days afterwards. That housekeeper left, if I recollect rightly, 2 years after he came, and another, whom I did not know, was her successor. She lives there still. Time wore on at the Grange in its former pleasant way, till Miss Cathy reached 16. On the anniversary of her birth, we never manifested any signs of rejoicing, because it was also the anniversary of my late mistress's death. Her father invariably spent that day alone in the library, and walked at dusk as far as Gimmerton Kirkyard, where he would frequently prolong his stay beyond midnight. Therefore Catherine was thrown on her own resources for amusement. This 20th of March was a beautiful spring day, and when her father had retired, my young lady came down dressed for going out, and said she had asked to have a ramble on the edge of the moors with me, and Mr. Linton had given her leave, if we only went a short distance, and were back within the hour. "So make haste, Ellen," she cried. "I know where I wish to go, where a colony of moor game are settled. I want to see whether they have made their nests yet." "That must be a good distance up," I answered. "They don't breed on the edge of the moor." "No, it's not," she said. "I've gone very near with papa." I put on my bonnet and sallied out, thinking nothing more of the matter. She bounded before me and returned to my side, and was off again like a young greyhound. And at first I found plenty of entertainment in listening to the larks singing far and near, and enjoying the sweet, warm sunshine, and watching her, my pet and my delight, with her golden ringlets flying loose behind, and her bright cheek, as soft and pure in its bloom as a wild rose, and her eyes radiant with cloudless pleasure. She was a happy creature, and an angel in those days. It's a pity she could not be content. "Well," said I, "where are your moor game, Miss Cathy? We should be at them. The Grange Park fence is a great way off now." "Oh, a little further, only a little further, Ellen," was her answer continually. "Climb to that hillock, pass that bank, and by the time you reach the other side, I shall have raised the birds." But there were so many hillocks and banks to climb and pass, that at length I began to be weary, and told her we must halt and retrace our steps. I shouted to her, as she had outstripped me a long way. She either did not hear or did not regard, for she still sprang on, and I was compelled to follow. Finally she dived into a hollow, and before I came in sight of her again, she was 2 miles nearer Wuthering Heights than her own home, and I beheld a couple of persons arrest her, one of whom I felt convinced was Mr. Heathcliff himself. Cathy had been caught in the fact of plundering, or at least hunting out the nests of the grouse. The heights were Heathcliff's land, and he was reproving the poacher. "I've neither taken any nor found any," she said, as I toiled to them, expanding her hands in corroboration of the statement. "I didn't mean to take them, but papa told me there were some quantities up here, and I wished to see the eggs." Heathcliff glanced at me with an ill-meaning smile, expressing his acquaintance with the party, and consequently his malevolence towards it, and demanded who Papa was. "Mr. Linton of Thrushcross Grange," she replied. "I thought you did not know me, or you wouldn't have spoken in that way." "You suppose Papa is highly esteemed and respected, then?" he said sarcastically. "And what are you?" inquired Catherine, gazing curiously on the speaker. "That man I've seen before, is he your son?" She pointed to Hareton, the other individual, who had gained nothing but increased bulk and strength by the addition of 2 years to his age. He seemed as awkward and rough as ever. "Miss Cathy," I interrupted, "it will be 3 hours instead of 1 that we are out presently. We really must go back." "No, that man is not my son," answered Heathcliff, pushing me aside, "but I have one, and you have seen him before too. And though your nurse is in a hurry, I think both you and she would be the better for a little rest. Will you just turn this nab of health and walk into my house? You'll get home earlier for the ease, and you shall receive a kind welcome." I whispered Catherine that she mustn't, on any account, accede to the proposal. It was entirely out of the question. "Why?" she asked aloud. "I'm tired of running, and the ground is dewy. I can't sit here. Let us go, Ellen. Besides, he says I have seen his son. He's mistaken, I think, but I guess where he lives at the farmhouse I visited in coming from Penistone Crags. Don't you?" "I do. Come, Nelly, hold your tongue. It will be a treat for her to look in on us. Hareton, get forwards with the lass. You shall walk with me, Nelly." "No, she's not going to any such place," I cried, struggling to release my arm, which he had seized. But she was almost at the door-stones already, scampering round the brow at full speed. Her appointed companion did not pretend to escort her. He shied off by the roadside and vanished. "Mr. Heathcliff, it's very wrong," I continued. "You know you mean no good. And there she'll see Linton, and all will be told, as soon as ever we return, and I shall have the blame." "I want her to see Linton," he answered. "He's looking better these few days. It's not often he's fit to be seen. And we'll soon persuade her to keep the visit secret. Where is the harm of it?" "The harm of it that her father would hate me if he found I suffered her to enter your house. And I am convinced you have a bad design in encouraging her to do so," I replied. "My design is as honest as possible. I'll inform you of its whole scope, that the 2 cousins may fall in love and get married. I'm acting generously to your master. His young chit has no expectations, and should she second my wishes, she'll be provided for at once as joint successor with Linton." "If Linton died," I answered, "and his life is quite uncertain, Catherine would be the heir." "No, she would not," he said. "There is no clause in the will to secure it so. His property would go to me, but to prevent disputes I desire their union, and am resolved to bring it about." "And I'm resolved she shall never approach your house with me again," I returned, as we reached the gate, where Miss Cathy waited our coming. Heathcliff bid me be quiet, and preceding us up the path, hastened to open the door. My young lady gave him several looks, as if she could not exactly make up her mind what to think of him. But now he smiled when he met her eye, and softened his voice in addressing her, and I was foolish enough to imagine the memory of her mother might disarm him from desiring her injury. Linton stood on the hearth. He had been out walking in the fields, for his cap was on, and he was calling to Joseph to bring him dry shoes. He had grown tall of his age, still wanting some months of 16. His features were pretty yet, and his eye and complexion brighter than I remembered them, though with merely temporary lustre borrowed from the salubrious air and genial sun. "Now, who is that?" asked Mr. Heathcliff, turning to Cathy. "Can you tell?" "Your son?" she said, having doubtfully surveyed first one and then the other. "Yes, yes," answered he. "But is this the only time you have beheld him? Think! Ah, you have a short memory. Linton, don't you recall your cousin that you used to tease us so with wishing to see? What? Linton? Cried Kathy, kindling into joyful surprise at the name. Is that little Linton? He's taller than I am. Are you Linton? The youth stepped forward and acknowledged himself. She kissed him fervently, and they gazed with wonder at the change of time had wrought in the appearance of each. Catherine had reached her full height. Her figure was both plump and slender, elastic as steel, and her whole aspect sparkling with health and spirits. Linton's look and movements were very languid, and his form extremely slight, but there was grace in his manner that mitigated these defects, and rendered him not unpleasing. After exchanging numerous marks of fondness with him, his cousin went to Mr. Heathcliff, who lingered by the door, dividing his attention between the objects inside and those that lay without, pretending, that is, to observe the latter, and really noting the former alone. "And you are my uncle, then?" she cried, reaching up to salute him. "I thought I liked you, though you were cross at first. Why don't you visit at the Grange with Linton? To live all these years such close neighbours and never see us is odd. What have you done so for?" "I visited once or twice too often before you were born," he answered. "There, damn it, if you have any kisses to spare, give them to Linton. They are thrown away on me." "Naughty Ellen!" exclaimed Catherine, flying to attack me next with her lavish caresses. "Wicked Ellen, to try and hinder me from entering. But I'll take this walk every morning in future. May I, uncle? And sometimes bring papa. Won't you be glad to see us?" "Of course," replied the uncle, with a hardly suppressed grimace, resulting from his deep aversion to both the proposed visitors. "But stay," he continued, turning towards the young lady. "Now I think of it, I'd better tell you. Mr. Linden has a prejudice against me. We quarrelled at one time of our lives with unchristian ferocity, and if you mention coming here to him, he'll put a veto on your visits altogether. Therefore you must not mention it, unless you be careful of seeing your cousin hereafter. You may come if you will, but you must not mention it." "Why did you quarrel?" asked Catherine, considerably crestfallen. "He thought me too poor to wed his sister," answered Heathcliff, "and was grieved that I got her. His pride was hurt, and he'll never forgive it." "That's wrong," said the young lady. "Some time I'll tell him so. But Linton and I have no share in your quarrel. I'll not come here then. He shall come to the Grange." "It will be too far for me," murmured her cousin. "To walk 4 miles would kill me. No, come here, Miss Catherine, now and then. Not every morning, but once or twice a week." His father launched towards his son a glance of bitter contempt. "I am afraid, Nelly, I shall lose my labour," he muttered to me. "Miss Catherine, as the ninny calls her, will discover his value and send him to the devil. Now, if it had been Hareton, do you know that 20 times a day I covet Hareton with all his degradation? I'd have loved the lad had he been someone else, but I think he's safe from her love. I'll pit him against that paltry creature, unless it bestir itself briskly. We calculate it will scarcely last till it is 18. Oh, confound the vapid thing! He's absorbed in drying his feet, and never looks at her. Linton!" "Yes, father," answered the boy. "Have you nothing to show your cousin? Anywhere about, not even a rabbit or a weasel's nest? Take her into the garden before you change your shoes, and into the stable to see your horse." "Wouldn't you rather sit here?" asked Linton, addressing Cathy in a tone which expressed reluctance to move again. "I don't know," she replied, casting a longing look to the door, and evidently eager to be active. He kept his seat, and shrank closer to the fire. Heathcliff rose and went into the kitchen, and from thence to the yard, calling out for Hareton. Hareton responded, and presently the two re-entered. The young man had been washing himself, as was visible by the glow on his cheeks and his wetted hair. "Oh, I'll ask you, uncle," cried Miss Cathy, recollecting the housekeeper's assertion. "That's not my cousin, is he?" Yes, he replied, your mother's nephew. Don't you like him? Catherine looked queer. Is he not a handsome lad? He continued. The uncivil little thing stood on tiptoe and whispered a sentence in Heathcliff's ear. He laughed. Hareton darkened. I perceived he was very sensitive to suspected slights, and had obviously a dim notion of his inferiority. But his master or guardian chased the frown by exclaiming, "You'll be the favourite among us, Hareton. She says you are what was it? Well, something very flattering. Here, you go with her round the farm, and behave like a gentleman, mind. Don't use any bad words, and don't stare when the young lady is not looking at you, and be ready to hide your face when she is. And when you speak, say your words slowly, and keep your hands out of your pockets. Be off, and entertain her as nicely as you can." He watched the couple walking past the window. Earnshaw had his countenance completely averted from his companion. He seemed studying the familiar landscape with a stranger's and an artist's interest. Catherine took a sly look at him, expressing small admiration. She then turned her attention to seeking out objects of amusement for herself, and tripped merrily on, lilting a tune to supply the lack of conversation. "I've tied his tongue," observed Heathcliff. "He'll not venture a single syllable all the time. Nelly, you recollect me at his age, nay, some years younger. Did I ever look so stupid, so gomless, as Joseph calls it?" "Worse," I replied, because more sullen with it. "I've a pleasure in him," he continued, reflecting aloud. "He has satisfied my expectations. If he were a born fool I should not enjoy it half so much. But he's no fool, and I can sympathize with all his feelings, having felt them myself. I know what he suffers now, for instance, exactly. It is merely a beginning of what he shall suffer, though. And he'll never be able to emerge from his bathos of coarseness and ignorance. I've got him faster than his scoundrel of a father secured me, and lower, for he takes a pride in his brutishness. I've taught him to scorn everything extra-animal as silly and weak. Don't you think Hindley would be proud of his son if he could see him? Almost as proud as I am of mine. But there's this difference. One is gold put to the use of paving stones, and the other is tin polished to ape a service of silver. Mine has nothing valuable about it, yet I shall have the merit of making it go as far as poor stuff can go. His had first-rate qualities, and they are lost, rendered worse than unavailing. I have nothing to regret. He would have more than any, but I are aware of, and the best of it is, Hareton is damnably fond of me. You'll own that I've outmatched Hindley there. If the dead villain could rise from his grave to abuse me for his offspring's wrongs, I should have the fun of seeing said offspring fight him back again, indignant that he should dare to rail at the one friend he has in the world." Heathcliff chuckled a fiendish laugh at the idea. I made no reply, because I saw that he expected none. Meantime, our young companion, who sat too removed from us to hear what was said, began to invent symptoms of uneasiness, probably repenting that he had denied himself the treat of Catherine's society for fear of a little fatigue. His father remarked the restless glances wandering to the window, and the hand irresolutely extended towards his cap. "Get up, you idle boy!" he exclaimed with assumed tardiness. "Away after them! They are just at the corner, by the stand of hives." Linton gathered his energies and left the hearth. The lattice was open, and as he stepped out, I heard Cathy inquiring of her unsociable attendant, what was that inscription over the door? Hareton stared up and scratched his head like a true clown. "It's some damnable writing," he answered. "I cannot read it." "Can't read it? I can read it. It's English. But I want to know why it is there." Linton giggled, the first appearance of mirth he had exhibited. "He does not know his letters," he said to his cousin. "Could you believe in the existence of such a colossal dunce?" "Is he all as he should be?" said Miss Cathy seriously. "Or is he simple? Not right?" I've questioned him twice now, and each time he looks so stupid, I think he does not understand me. I can hardly understand him, I'm sure." Linton repeated his laugh, and glanced at Hareton tauntingly, who certainly did not seem quite clear of comprehension at that moment. "There's nothing the matter but laziness, is there, Earnshaw?" he said. "My cousin fancies you are an idiot. There you experience the consequence of scorning book learning, as you would say. Have you noticed, Catherine, his frightful Yorkshire pronunciation?" "Why, where the devil is the use on't?" growled Hareton, more ready in answering his daily companion. He was about to enlarge further, but the two youngsters broke into a noisy fit of merriment, my giddy miss being delighted to discover that he might turn his strange talk to matter of amusement. "Where is the use of the devil in that sentence?" tittered Linton. "Papa told you not to say any bad words, and you can't open your mouth without one. Do try to behave like a gentleman, now do." "If thou weren't more of a lass than a lad, I'd fell thee this minute, I would, pitiful laugh of a crater," retorted the angry boor, retreating while his face burnt with mingled rage and mortification, for he was conscious of being insulted, and embarrassed how to resent it. Mr. Heathcliff, having overheard the conversation as well as I, smiled when he saw him go, but immediately afterwards cast a look of singular aversion on the flippant pair, who remained chattering in the doorway, the boy finding animation enough while discussing Hareton's faults and deficiencies, and relating anecdotes of his goings-on, and the girl relishing his pert and spiteful sayings without considering the ill nature they evinced. But I began to dislike, more than to compassionate Linton, and to excuse his father in some measure for holding him cheap. We stayed till afternoon. I could not tear Miss Cathy away before, but happily my master had not quitted his apartment, and remained ignorant of our prolonged absence. As we walked home, I would fain have enlightened my charge on the characters of the people we had quitted, but she got it into her head that I was prejudiced against them. "Aha!" she cried, "you take papa's side, Ellen. You are partial. I know, or else you wouldn't have cheated me so many years into the notion that Linton lived a long way from here. I'm really extremely angry, only I'm so pleased I can't show it. But you must hold your tongue about my uncle. He's my uncle, remember, and I'll scold papa for quarrelling with him." And so she ran on till I dropped endeavouring to convince her of her mistake. She did not mention the visit that night, because she did not see Mr. Linton. Next day it all came out, sadly to my chagrin, and still I was not altogether sorry. I thought the burden of directing and warning would be more efficiently borne by him than me, but he was too timid in giving satisfactory reasons for his wish that she would shun connection with the household of the Heights, and Catherine liked good reasons for every restraint that harassed her petted will. "Papa," she exclaimed, after the morning salutations, "guess whom I saw yesterday in my walk on the moors." "Ah, papa, you started. You've not done right, have you now?" "I saw. But listen, you shall hear how I found out. And Ellen, who is in league with you, and yet pretended to pity me so when I kept hoping, and was always disappointed about Linton's coming back." She gave a faithful account of her excursion and its consequences, and my master, though he cast more than one reproachful look at me, said nothing till she had concluded. Then he drew her to him, and asked if she knew why he had concealed Linton's near neighbourhood from her. Could she think it was to deny her a pleasure that she might harmlessly enjoy? "It was because you disliked Mr. Heathcliff," she answered. "Then you believe I care more for my own feelings than yours, Cathy?" "No, it was not because I disliked Mr. Heathcliff, but because Mr. Heathcliff dislikes me, and is a most diabolical man, delighting to wrong and ruin those he hates if they give him the slightest opportunity. I knew that you could not keep up an acquaintance with your cousin without being brought into contact with him, and I knew he would detest you, on my account. So for your own good and nothing else, I took precautions that you should not see Linton again. I meant to explain this some time as you grew older, and I'm sorry I delayed it." "But Mr. Heathcliff was quite cordial, papa," observed Catherine, not at all convinced, "and he didn't object to our seeing each other. He said I might come to his house when I pleased, only I must not tell you, because you had quarrelled with him, and would not forgive him for marrying Aunt Isabella. And you won't. You are the one to be blamed. He is willing to let us be friends. At least, Linton and I, and you are not." My master, perceiving that she would not take his word for her uncle-in-law's evil disposition, gave a hasty sketch of his conduct to Isabella, and the manner in which Wuthering Heights became his property. He could not bear to discourse long upon the topic, for though he spoke little of it, he still felt the same horror and detestation of his ancient enemy that had occupied his heart ever since Mrs. Linton's death. "She might have been living yet if it had not been for him," was his constant bitter reflection, and in his eyes Heathcliff seemed a murderer. Miss Cathy, conversant with no bad deeds except her own slight acts of disobedience, injustice, and passion, arising from hot temper and thoughtlessness, and repented of on the day they were committed, was amazed at the blackness of spirit that could brood on, and cover revenge for years, and deliberately prosecute its plans without a visitation of remorse. She appeared so deeply impressed and shocked at this new view of human nature, excluded from all her studies and all her ideas till now, that Mr. Edgar deemed it unnecessary to pursue the subject. He merely added, "You will know hereafter, darling, why I wish you to avoid his house and family. Now return to your old employments and amusements, and think no more about them." Catherine kissed her father, and sat down quietly to her lessons for a couple of hours according to custom. Then she accompanied him into the grounds, and the whole day passed as usual. But in the evening, when she had retired to her room, and I went to help her undress, I found her crying on her knees by the bedside. "Oh, Fee, silly child!" I exclaimed. "If you had any real griefs, you'd be ashamed to waste a tear on this little contrariety. You never had one shadow of substantial sorrow, Miss Catherine. Suppose for a minute that master and I were dead, and you were by yourself in the world, how would you feel then? Compare the present occasion with such an affliction as that, and be thankful for the friends you have, instead of coveting more." "I'm not crying for myself, Ellen," she answered. "It's for him. He expected to see me again to-morrow, and there, he'll be so disappointed, and he'll wait for me, and I shan't come." "Nonsense," said I. "Do you imagine he has thought as much of you as you have of him? Hasn't he Hareton for a companion? Not once in 100 would weep at losing a relation they had just seen twice for 2 afternoons. Linton will conjecture how it is, and trouble himself no further about you." "But may I not write a note to tell him why I cannot come?" she asked, rising to her feet. "And just send those books I promised to lend him. His books are not as nice as mine, and he wanted to have them extremely when I told him how interesting they were. May I not, Ellen?" "No, indeed, no," replied I with decision. Then he would write to you, and there never be an end of it. No, Miss Catherine, the acquaintance must be dropped entirely, so papa expects, and I shall see that it is done." "But how can one little note—" she recommenced, putting on an imploring countenance. "Silence!" I interrupted. "We'll not begin with your little notes. Get into bed." She threw at me a very naughty look, so naughty that I would not kiss her good night at first. I covered her up and shut her door in great displeasure. But repenting halfway, I returned softly, and lo! there was Miss, standing at the table with a bit of blank paper before her, and a pencil in her hand, which she guiltily slipped out of sight on my re-entrance. "You'll get nobody to take that, Catherine," I said, "if you write it, and at present I shall put out your candle." I set the extinguisher on the flame, receiving as I did so a slap on my hand, and a petulant, cross thing. I then quitted her again, and she drew the bolt in one of her worst, most peevish humours. The letter was finished and forwarded to its destination by a milk fetcher who came from the village, but that I didn't learn till some time afterwards. Weeks passed on, and Kathy recovered her temper, though she grew wondrous fond of stealing off to corners by herself, and often if I came near her suddenly while reading, she would start and bend over the book, evidently desirous to hide it, and I detected edges of loose paper sticking out beyond the leaves. She also got a trick of coming down early in the morning and lingering about the kitchen, as if she were expecting the arrival of something. And she had a small drawer in a cabinet in the library, which she would trifle over for hours, and whose key she took special care to remove when she left it. One day, as she inspected this drawer, I observed that the playthings and trinkets which recently formed its contents were transmuted into bits of folded paper. My curiosity and suspicions were roused. I determined to take a peep at her mysterious treasures. So at night, as soon as she and my master were safe upstairs, I searched and readily found among my house keys one that would fit the lock. Having opened, I emptied the whole contents into my apron, and took them with me to examine at leisure in my own chamber. Though I could not but suspect, I was still surprised to discover that they were a mass of correspondence. Daily, almost, it must have been, from Linton Heathcliff, answers to documents forwarded to her. The earlier dated were embarrassed and short. Gradually, however, they expanded into copious love letters, foolish as the age of the writer rendered natural, yet with touches here and there which I thought were borrowed from a more experienced source. Some of them struck me as singularly odd compounds of ardour and flatness, commencing in strong feeling, and concluding in the affected wordy way that a schoolboy might use to a fancied and corporeal sweetheart. Whether they satisfied Kathy, I don't know, but they appeared very worthless trash to me. After turning over as many as I thought proper, I tied them in a handkerchief and set them aside, relocking the vacant drawer. Following her habit, my young lady descended early and visited the kitchen. I watched her go to the door on the arrival of a certain little boy, and while the dairymaid filled his can, she tucked something into his jacket pocket and plucked something out. I went round by the garden and laid wait for the messenger, who fought valorously to defend his trust, and we split the milk between us. But I succeeded in abstracting the epistle, and threatening serious consequences if he did not look sharp home. I remained under the wall and perused Miss Cathy's affectionate composition. It was more simple and more eloquent than her cousin's, very pretty and very silly. I shook my head and went, meditating, into the house. The day being wet, she could not divert herself with rambling about the park, so at the conclusion of her morning studies, she resorted to the solace of the drawer. Her father sat reading at the table, and I, on purpose, had sought a bit of work in some unripped fringes of the window curtain, keeping my eyes steadily fixed on her proceedings. Never did any bird flying back to a plundered nest, which it had left brimful of chirping young ones, express more complete despair in its anguished cries and flutterings than she by her single "Ha!" and the change that transfigured her late happy countenance. Mr. Linton looked up. "What is the matter, love? Have you hurt yourself?" he said. His tone and look assured her that he had not been the discoverer of the hoard. "No, papa. Ellen, come upstairs. I'm sick." I obeyed her summons and accompanied her out. "Oh, Ellen, you have got them!" she commenced immediately, dropping on her knees when we were enclosed again. "Oh, give them to me, and I'll never, never do so again. Don't tell papa. You have not told papa, Ellen. Say you have not. I've been exceedingly naughty, but I won't do it any more." With a grave severity in my manner, I bid her stand up. "So," I exclaimed, "Miss Catherine, you are tolerably far on, it seems. You may well be ashamed of them. A fine bundle of trash you study in your leisure hours, to be sure. Why, it's good enough to be printed. And what do you suppose the master will think when I display it before him? I haven't shown it yet, but you needn't imagine I'll keep your ridiculous secrets. For shame! And you must have led the way in writing such absurdities. He would not have thought of beginning, I'm certain." I didn't," sobbed Kathy, fit to break her heart. "I didn't once think of loving him till—" "Loving!" cried I, as scornfully as I could utter the word. "Loving! Did anybody ever hear the like? I might just as well talk of loving the miller who comes once a year to buy our corn." "Pretty loving indeed, and both times together you have seen Linton hardly 4 hours in your life. Now here is the babyish trash. I'm going with it to the library, and we'll see what your father says to such loving." She sprang at her precious epistles, but I held them above my head, and then she poured out further frantic entreaties that I would burn them, do anything rather than show them. And being really fully as inclined to laugh as scold, for I esteemed it all girlish vanity, I at length relented in a measure, and asked, "If I consent to burn them, will you promise faithfully neither to send nor receive a letter again, nor a book, for I perceive you had sent him books, nor locks of hair, nor rings, nor playthings." "We don't send playthings," cried Catherine, her pride overcoming her shame. "Nor anything at all then, my lady. Unless you will, here I go." "I promise, Ellen," she cried, catching my dress. "Oh, put them in the fire. Do, do." But when I proceeded to open a place with the poker, the sacrifice was too painful to be borne. She earnestly supplicated that I would spare her 1 or 2. "1 or 2, Ellen, to keep for Linton's sake." I unknotted the handkerchief and commenced dropping them in from an angle, and the flame curled up the chimney. "I will have 1, you cruel wretch!" she screamed, darting her hand into the fire, and drawing forth some half-consumed fragments at the expense of her fingers. "Very well, and I will have some to exhibit to papa," I answered, shaking back the rest into the bundle, and turning anew to the door. She emptied her blackened pieces into the flames, and motioned me to finish the immolation. It was done. I stirred up the ashes, and interred them under a shovelful of coals, and she mutely, and with a sense of intense injury, retired to her private apartment. I descended to tell my master that the young lady's qualm of sickness was almost gone, but I judged it best for her to lie down a while. She wouldn't dine, but she reappeared at tea, pale and red about the eyes, and marvellously subdued in outward aspect. Next morning I answered the letter by a slip of paper inscribed, "Master Heathcliff is requested to send no more notes to Miss Linton, as she will not receive them." And thenceforth the little boy came with empty pockets. Chapter 8. Summer drew to an end, and early autumn. It was past Michaelmas, but the harvest was late that year, and a few of our fields were still uncleared. Mr. Linton and his daughter would frequently walk out among the reapers, carrying the last sheaves. They stayed till dusk, and the evening happened to be chill and damp. My master caught a bad cold that, settling obstinately on his lungs, confined him indoors throughout the whole of the winter, nearly without intermission. Poor Kathy, frightened from her little romance, had been considerably sadder and duller since its abandonment, and her father insisted on her reading less and taking more exercise. She had his companionship no longer. I esteemed it a duty to supply its lack, as much as possible, with mine. An inefficient substitute, for I could only spare 2 or 3 hours from my numerous diurnal occupations to follow her footsteps, and then my society was obviously less desirable than his. On an afternoon in October, or the beginning of November, a fresh, watery afternoon, when the turf and paths were rustling with moist, withered leaves, and the cold blue sky was half hidden by clouds, dark gray streamers, rapidly mounting from the west and boding abundant rain. I requested my young lady to forego her ramble because I was certain of showers. She refused, and I unwillingly donned a cloak and took my umbrella to accompany her on a stroll to the bottom of the park, a formal walk which she generally affected if low-spirited, and that she invariably was when Mr. Edgar had been worse than ordinary, a thing never known from his confession, but guessed both by her and me from his increased silence and the melancholy of his countenance. She went sadly on. There was no running or bounding now, though the chill wind might have tempted her to a race, and often from the side of my eye I could detect her raising a hand and brushing something off her cheek. I gazed round for a means of diverting her thoughts. On one side of the road rose a high, rough bank, where hazels and stunted oaks, with their roots half exposed, held uncertain tenure. The soil was too loose for the latter, and strong winds had blown some nearly horizontal. In summer Miss Catherine delighted to climb along these trunks and sit in the branches, swinging 20 feet above the ground, and I, pleased with her agility and her light childish heart, still considered it proper to scold every time I caught her at such an elevation, but so that she knew there was no necessity for descending. From dinner to tea she would lie in her breeze-rocked cradle, doing nothing except singing old songs, my nursery lore, to herself, or watching the birds, joint tenants, feed and entice their young ones to fly, or nestling with closed lids, half thinking, half dreaming, happier than words can express. "Look, miss," I exclaimed, pointing to a nook under the roots of one twisted tree. "Winter's not here yet. There's a little flower up yonder, the last bud from the multitude of bluebells that clouded those turf steps in July with a lilac mist. Will you clamber up and pluck it to show to papa?" Kathy stared a long time at the lonely blossom trembling in its earthly shelter, and replied at length, "No, I'll not touch it. But it looks melancholy, does it not, Ellen?" "Yes," I observed, "about as starved and sackless as you. Your cheeks are bloodless. Let us take hold of hands and run. You're so low, I dare say I shall keep up with you." "No," she repeated, and continued sauntering on, pausing at intervals to muse over a bit of moss, or a tuft of blanched grass, or a fungus spreading its bright orange among the heaps of brown foliage. And ever and anon her hand was lifted to her averted face. "Catherine, why are you crying, love?" I asked, approaching and putting an arm over her shoulder. "You mustn't cry because papa has a cold. Be thankful it is nothing worse." She now put no further restraint on her tears. Her breath was stifled by sobs. "Oh, it will be something worse," she said, "and what shall I do when papa and you leave me, and I am by myself? I can't forget your words, Ellen. They are always in my ear. How life will be changed, how dreary the world will be, when papa and you are dead." "None can tell whether you won't die before us," I replied. "It's wrong to anticipate evil. We'll hope there are years and years to come before any of us go. My master is young, and I am strong and hardly 45. My mother lived till 80, a canty dame to the last. And suppose Mr. Linton were spared till he saw 60, that would be more years than you have counted, miss. And would it not be foolish to mourn a calamity above 20 years beforehand?" "But Aunt Isabella was younger than papa," she remarked, gazing up with timid hope to seek further consolation. "Aunt Isabella had not you and me to nurse her," I replied. "She wasn't as happy as master. She hadn't as much to live for. All you need to do is to wait well on your father and cheer him by letting him see you cheerful, and avoid giving him anxiety on any subject. Mind that, Kathy. I'll not disguise, but you might kill him if you were wild and reckless, and cherished a foolish, fanciful affection for the son of a person who would be glad to have him in his grave, and allowed him to discover that you fretted over the separation he has judged it expedient to make. I fret about nothing on earth except Papa's illness, answered my companion. I care for nothing in comparison with Papa, and I'll never, never, oh never will I have my senses do an act or say a word to vex him. I love him better than myself, Ellen, and I know it by this. I pray every night that I may live after him, because I would rather be miserable than that he should be. That proves I love him better than I love myself. Good words, I replied, but deeds must prove it also. And after he is well, remember you don't forget resolutions formed in the hour of fear. As we talked, we neared a door that opened on the road, and my young lady, lightening into sunshine again, climbed up and seated herself on the top of the wall, reaching over to gather some hips that bloomed scarlet on the summit branches of the wild rose trees, shadowing the highway side. The lower fruit had disappeared, but only birds could touch the upper, except from Kathy's present station. And stretching to pull them, her hat fell off, and as the door was locked, she proposed scrambling down to recover it. I bid her be cautious lest she got a fall, and she nimbly disappeared. But the return was no such easy matter. The stones were smooth and neatly cemented, and the rose bushes and blackberry stragglers could yield no assistance in reascending. I, like a fool, didn't recollect that till I heard her laughing and exclaiming, "Ellen, you'll have to fetch the key, or else I must run round to the porter's lodge. I can't scale the ramparts on this side." "Stay where you are," I answered. "I have my bundle of keys in my pocket. Perhaps I may manage to open it. If not, I'll go." Catherine amused herself with dancing to and fro before the door, while I tried all the large keys in succession. I had applied the last, and found that none would do. So, repeating my desire that she would remain there, I was about to hurry home as fast as I could, when an approaching sound arrested me. It was the trot of a horse. Kathy's dance stopped, and in a minute the horse stopped also. "Who is that?" I whispered. "Ellen, I wish you could open the door," whispered back my companion anxiously. "Ho, Miss Linton!" cried a deep voice, the rider's. "I'm glad to meet you. Don't be in a haste to enter, for I have an explanation to ask and obtain." "I shan't speak to you, Mr. Heathcliff," answered Catherine. "Papa says you are a wicked man, and you hate both him and me, and Ellen says the same." "That is nothing to the purpose," said Heathcliff. He it was. "I don't hate my son, I suppose, and it is concerning him that I demand your attention. Yes, you have cause to blush. 2 or 3 months since, were you not in the habit of writing to Linton? Making love and play, eh? You deserved, both of you, flogging for that. You, especially, the elder, and less sensitive, as it turns out. I've got your letters, and if you give me any pertness, I'll send them to your father. I presume you grew weary of the amusement and dropped it, didn't you? Well, you dropped Linton with it, into a slough of despond. He was in earnest love, really. And as true as I live, he's dying for you, breaking his heart at your fickleness, not figuratively, but actually. Though Hareton has made him a standing jest for 6 weeks, and I have used more serious measures, and attempted to frighten him out of his idiocy, he gets worse daily, and he'll be under the sod before summer, unless you restore him." "How can you lie so glaringly to the poor child?" I called from the inside. "Pray, ride on. How can you deliberately get up such paltry falsehoods? Miss Cathy, I'll knock the lock off with a stone. You won't believe that vile nonsense. You can feel in yourself it is impossible that a person should die for love of a stranger." "I was not aware there were eavesdroppers," muttered the detected villain. "Worthy Mrs. Dean, I like you, but I don't like your double-dealing," he added aloud. "How could you lie so glaringly as to affirm I hated the poor child, and invent bugbear stories to terrify her from my door-stones? Catherine Linton, my bonny lass, I shall be from home all this week. Go and see if I have not spoken truth. Do, there's a darling. Just imagine your father in my place, and Linton in yours. Then think how you would value your careless lover if he refused to stir a step to comfort you when your father himself entreated him. And don't, from pure stupidity, fall into the same error. I swear on my salvation he's going to his grave, and none but you can save him." The lock gave way, and I issued out. "I swear Linton is dying," repeated Heathcliff, looking hard at me, "and grief and disappointment are hastening his death. Nelly, if you won't let her go, you can walk over yourself. But I shall not return till this time next week, and I think your master himself would scarcely object to her visiting her cousin." "Come in," said I, taking Cathy by the arm, and half forcing her to re-enter, for she lingered, viewing with troubled eyes the features of the speaker, too stern to express his inward deceit. He pushed his horse close, and bending down, observed, "Miss Catherine, I'll own to you that I have little patience with Linton, and Hareton and Joseph have left. I'll own that he's with a harsh set. He pines for kindness as well as love, and a kind word from you would be his best medicine. Don't mind Mrs. Dean's cruel cautions, but be generous, and contrive to see him. He dreams of you day and night, and cannot be persuaded that you don't hate him, since you neither write nor call." I closed the door, and rolled a stone to assist the loosened lock in holding it, and spreading my umbrella, I drew my charge underneath, for the rain began to drive through the moaning branches of the trees, and warned us to avoid delay. Our hurry prevented any comment on the encounter with Heathcliff as we stretched towards home, but I divined instinctively that Catherine's heart was clouded now in double darkness. Her features were so sad they did not seem hers. She evidently regarded that what she had heard as every syllable true. The master had retired to rest before we came in. Cathy stole to his room to inquire how he was. He had fallen asleep. She returned and asked me to sit with her in the library. We took our tea together, and afterwards she lay down on the rug and told me not to talk, for she was weary. I got a book and pretended to read. As soon as she supposed me absorbed in my occupation, she recommenced her silent weeping. It appeared at present her favourite diversion. I suffered her to enjoy it a while. I expostulated, deriding and ridiculing all Mr. Heathcliff's assertions about his son, as if I were certain she would coincide. Alas, I hadn't skill to counteract the effect his account had produced. It was just what he intended. "You may be right, Ellen," she answered, "but I shall never feel at ease till I know. And I must tell Linton it is not my fault that I don't write, and convince him that I shall not change." What use were anger and protestations against her silly credulity? We parted that night hostile, but next day beheld me on the road to Wuthering Heights, by the side of my wilful young mistress's pony. I couldn't bear to witness her sorrow, to see her pale, dejected countenance and heavy eyes, and I yielded in the faint hope that Linton himself might prove by his reception of us how little of the tale was founded on fact. Chapter 9. The rainy night had ushered in a misty morning, half frost, half drizzle, and temporary brooks crossed our path, gurgling from the uplands. My feet were thoroughly wetted. I was cross and low, exactly the humour suited for making the most of these disagreeable things. We entered the farmhouse by the kitchen way to ascertain whether Mr. Heathcliff were really absent, because I put slight faith in his own affirmation. Joseph seemed sitting in a sort of Elysium alone beside a roaring fire, a quart of ale on the table near him, bristling with large pieces of toasted oat-cake, and his black, short pipe in his mouth. Catherine ran to the hearth to warm herself. I asked if the master were in. My question remained so long unanswered that I thought the old man had grown deaf, and repeated it louder. "Nay, he snarled, or rather screamed through his nose. "Nay, you must go back where you come from." "Joseph!" cried a peevish voice, simultaneously with me, from the inner room. "How often am I to call you? There are only a few red ashes now. Joseph, come this moment!" Vigorous puffs and a resolute stare into the grate declared he had no ear for this appeal. The housekeeper and Hareton were invisible, one gone on an errand, and the other at his work, probably. We knew Linton's tones and entered. "Oh, I hope you'll die in a garret, starved to death," said the boy, mistaking our approach for that of his negligent attendant. He stopped. On observing his error, his cousin flew to him. "Is that you, Miss Linton?" he said, raising his head from the arm of the great chair in which he reclined. "No, don't kiss me. It takes my breath. Dear me, papa said you would call," continued he, after recovering a little from Catherine's embrace, while she stood by looking very contrite. "Why, will you shut the door, if you please? You left it open, and those detestable creatures won't bring coals to the fire. It's so cold." I stirred up the cinders, and fetched a scuttle full myself. The invalid complained of being covered with ashes, but he had a tiresome cough, and looked feverish and ill, so I did not rebuke his temper. "Well, Linton," murmured Catherine, when his corrugated brow relaxed, "are you glad to see me? Can I do you any good?" "Why didn't you come before?" he said. "You should have come instead of writing. It tired me dreadfully writing those long letters. I'd have far rather have talked to you. Now I can neither bear to talk nor anything else. I wonder where Zillah is. Will you step into the kitchen and see?" I had received no thanks for my other service, and being unwilling to run to and fro at his behest, I replied, "Nobody is out there but Joseph." "I want to drink," he exclaimed fretfully, turning away. "Zillah is constantly gadding off to Gimmerton since papa went. It's miserable, and I'm obliged to come down here. They resolved never to hear me upstairs." "Is your father attentive to you, Master Heathcliff?" I asked, perceiving Catherine to be checked in her friendly advances. "Attentive? He makes them a little more attentive at least," he cried. "The wretches! Do you know, Miss Linton, that brute Hareton laughs at me. I hate him. Indeed, I hate them all. They are odious beings." Cathy began searching for some water. She lighted on a pitcher in the dresser, filled a tumbler, and brought it. He bid her add a spoonful of wine from a bottle on the table, and having swallowed a small portion, appeared more tranquil, and said she was very kind. "And are you glad to see me?" asked she, reiterating her former question, and pleased to detect the faint dawn of a smile. "Yes, I am. It's something new to hear a voice like yours," he replied, "but I have been vexed because you wouldn't come, and papa swore it was owing to me. He called me a pitiful, shuffling, worthless thing, and said you despised me, and if he had been in my place, he would be more the master of the Grange than your father by this time. But you don't despise me, do you, miss?" "I wish you would say Catherine, or Cathy," interrupted my young lady. "Despise you? No. Next to papa and Ellen, I love you better than anybody living. I don't love Mr. Heathcliff, though, and I dare not come when he returns. Will he stay away many days?" "Not many," answered Linton, "but he goes on to the moors frequently, since the shooting season commenced, and you might spend an hour or two with me in his absence. Do, say you will. I think I should not be peevish with you. You'd not provoke me, and you'd always be ready to help me, wouldn't you?" "Yes," said Catherine, stroking his long, soft hair. "If I could only get papa's consent, I'd spend half my time with you. Pretty Linton, I wish you were my brother." "And then you would like me as well as your father," observed he more cheerfully. "But papa says you would love me better than him and all the world if you were my wife, so I'd rather you were that." "No, I should never love anybody better than papa," she returned gravely, "and people hate their wives sometimes. but not their sisters and brothers. And if you were the latter, you would live with us, and Papa would be as fond of you as he is of me." Linton denied that people ever hated their wives, but Kathy affirmed they did, and in her wisdom instanced his own father's aversion to her aunt. I endeavored to stop her thoughtless tongue. I couldn't succeed till everything she knew was out. Master Heathcliff, much irritated, asserted her relation was false. "Papa told me, and Papa does not tell falsehoods," she answered pertly. "My Papa scorns yours," cried Linton. "He calls him a sneaking fool." "Yours is a wicked man," retorted Catherine, "and you are very naughty to dare to repeat what he says. He must be wicked to have made Aunt Isabella leave him as she did." "She didn't leave him," said the boy. "You shan't contradict me." "She did," cried my young lady. "Well, I'll tell you something. Your mother hated your father, now then." "Oh!" exclaimed Catherine, too enraged to continue. "And she loved mine," added he. "You little liar! I hate you now," she panted, and her face grew red with passion. She did, sang Linton, sinking into the recess of his chair, and leaning back his head to enjoy the agitation of the other disputant, who stood behind. "Hush, Master Heathcliff," I said. "That's your father's tale too, I suppose." "It isn't. You hold your tongue," he answered. She did, Catherine. She did. Kathy, beside herself, gave the chair a violent push, and caused him to fall against one arm. He was immediately seized by a suffocating cough that soon ended his triumph. It lasted so long that it frightened even me. As to his cousin, she wept with all her might, aghast at the mischief she had done, though she said nothing. I held him till the fit exhausted itself. Then he thrust me away, and leant his head down silently. Catherine quelled her lamentations also, took a seat opposite, and looked solemnly into the fire. "How do you feel now, Master Heathcliff?" I inquired, after waiting 10 minutes. "I wish she felt as I do," he replied. "Spiteful, cruel thing! Hareton never touches me. He never struck me in his life. And I was better today, and there—" His voice died in a whimper. "I didn't strike you," muttered Kathy, chewing her lip to prevent another burst of emotion. He sighed and moaned like one under great suffering, and kept it up for 1/4 of an hour on purpose to distress his cousin, apparently, for whenever he caught a stifled sob from her, he put renewed pain and pathos into the inflections of his voice. "I'm sorry I hurt you, Linton," she said at length, wrecked beyond endurance, "but I couldn't have been hurt by that little push, and I had no idea that you could either. You're not much, are you, Linton? Don't let me go home thinking I've done you harm. Answer, speak to me." "I can't speak to you," he murmured. "You've hurt me so that I shall lie awake all night, choking with this cough. If you had it, you know what it was. But you'll be comfortably asleep while I'm in agony and nobody near me. I wonder how you would like to pass those fearful nights." And he began to wail aloud for very pity of himself. "Since you are in the habit of passing dreadful nights," I said, "it won't be Miss who spoils your ease. You'd be the same had she never come. However, she shall not disturb you again, and perhaps you'll get quieter when we leave you." "Must I go?" asked Catherine dolefully, bending over him. "Do you want me to go, Linton?" "You can't alter what you've done," he replied pettishly, shrinking from her, "unless you alter it for the worse by teasing me into a fever." "Well, then, must I go?" she repeated. "Let me alone, at least," said he. "I can't bear your talking." She lingered, and resisted my persuasions to departure a tiresome while, but as he neither looked up nor spoke, she finally made a movement to the door, and I followed. We were recalled by a scream. Linton had slid from his seat onto the hearthstone, and lay writhing in the mere perverseness of an indulged plague of a child, determined to be as grievous and harassing as it can. I thoroughly gauged his disposition from his behavior, and saw at once it would be folly to attempt humoring him. Not so my companion. She ran back in terror, knelt down, and cried and soothed and entreated till he grew quiet from lack of breath, by no means from compunction at distressing her. I shall lift him onto the settee, I said, and he may roll about as he pleases. We can't stop to watch him. I hope you are satisfied, Miss Cathy, that you are not the person to benefit him, and that his condition of health is not occasioned by attachment to you. Now then, there he is. Come away, as soon as he knows there's nobody by to care for his nonsense. He'll be glad to lie still. She placed a cushion under his head, and offered him some water. He rejected the latter, and tossed uneasily on the former, as if it were a stone or a block of wood. She tried to put it more comfortably. "I can't do with that," he said. "It's not high enough." Catherine brought another to lay above it. "That's too high," murmured the provoking thing. "How must I arrange it, then?" she asked despairingly. He twined himself up to her, as she half knelt by the settee, and converted her shoulder into a support. "No, that won't do," I said. "You'll be content with the cushion, Master Heathcliff. Miss has wasted too much time on you already. We cannot remain 5 minutes longer." "Yes, yes, we can," replied Cathy. "He's good and patient now. He's beginning to think I shall have far greater misery than he will tonight, if I believe he is worse for my visit. And then, I dare not come again. Tell the truth about it, Linton, for I mustn't come if I have hurt you." "You must come to cure me," he answered. "You ought to come because you have hurt me. You know you have extremely. I was not as ill when you entered as I am at present, was I?" "But you've made yourself ill by crying and being in a passion. I didn't do it all," said his cousin. "However, we'll be friends now. And you want me. You would wish to see me sometimes, really." "I told you I did," he replied impatiently. "Sit on the settee and let me lean on your knee. That's as mamma used to do, whole afternoons together. Sit quite still and don't talk. But you may sing a song if you can sing, or you may say a nice, long, interesting ballad, one of those you promised to teach me, or a story. I'd rather have a ballad, though. Begin." Catherine repeated the longest she could remember. The employment pleased both mightily. Linton would have another, and after that another, notwithstanding my strenuous objections, and so they went on until the clock struck 12, and we heard Hareton in the court returning for his dinner. "And tomorrow, Catherine, will you be here tomorrow?" asked young Heathcliff, holding her frock as she rose reluctantly. "No," I answered, "nor next day neither." She, however, gave a different response, evidently, for his forehead cleared as she stooped and whispered in his ear. "You won't go tomorrow, recollect, miss," I commenced when we were out of the house. "You are not dreaming of it, are you?" She smiled. "Oh, I'll take good care," I continued. "I'll have that lock mended, and you can escape by no way else." "I can get over the wall," she said, laughing. "The Grange is not a prison, Ellen, and you are not my jailer. And besides, I'm almost 17. I'm a woman, and I'm certain Linton would recover quickly if he had me to look after him. I'm older than he is, you know, and wiser, less childish, am I not? And he'll soon do as I direct him, with some slight coaxing. He's a pretty little darling when he's good. I'd make such a pet of him if he were mine. We should never quarrel, should we, after we were used to each other? Don't you like him, Ellen?" "Like him!" I exclaimed. "The worst-tempered bit of sickly slip that ever struggled into its teens. Happily, as Mr. Heathcliff conjectured, he'll not win 20. I doubt whether he'll see spring. Indeed, and small loss to his family whenever he drops off. It is lucky for us that his father took him. The kinder he was treated, the more tedious and selfish he'd be. I'm glad you have no chance of having him for a husband, Miss Catherine." My companion waxed serious at hearing this speech. To speak of his death so regardlessly wounded her feelings. "He's younger than I," she answered, after a protracted pause of meditation. "And he ought to live the longest. He will. He must live as long as I do. He's as strong now as when he first came into the North. I'm positive of that. It's only a cold that ails him, the same as Papa has. You say Papa will get better, and why shouldn't he?" "Well, well," I cried. "After all, we needn't trouble ourselves. For listen, miss, and mind, I'll keep my word. If you attempt going to Wuthering Heights again, with or without me, I shall inform Mr. Linton, and unless he allow it, the intimacy with your cousin must not be revived." "It has been revived," muttered Kathy, sulkily. "Must not be continued, then," I said. "We'll see," was her reply, and she set off at a gallop, leaving me to toil in the rear. We both reached home before our dinner time. My master supposed we had been wandering through the park, and therefore he demanded no explanation of our absence. As soon as I entered, I hastened to change my soaked shoes and stockings, but sitting such a while at the Heights had done the mischief. On the succeeding morning I was laid up, and during 3 weeks I remained incapacitated for attending to my duties, a calamity never experienced prior to that period, and never, I am thankful to say, since. My little mistress behaved like an angel in coming to wait on me and cheer my solitude. The confinement brought me exceedingly low. It is wearisome to a stirring, active body. But few have slighter reasons for complaints than I had. The moment Catherine left Mr. Linton's room, she appeared at my bedside. Her day was divided between us. No amusement usurped a minute. She neglected her meals, her studies, and her play, and she was the fondest nurse that ever watched. She must have had a warm heart, when she loved her father so, to give so much to me. I said her days were divided between us, but the master retired early, and I generally needed nothing after 6 o'clock. Thus the evening was her own. Poor thing! I never considered what she did with herself after tea, and though frequently, when she looked in to bid me good night, I remarked a fresh colour in her cheeks, and a pinkness over her slender fingers, instead of fancying the hue borrowed from a cold ride across the moors, I laid it to the charge of a hot fire in the library.